A man bleeding profusely lies motionless in the rain. This man's name is Yin Yu Tian, and he's about to die any minute now. A strange screen appeared before the young man's eyes. He was surprised. Does this thing really appear every time someone dies? The screen displayed information stating that his bodily functions were severely impaired. It asked whether he wanted to restore them. Yin Yu Tian was puzzled. What does this mean? Did that mean that if he chose yes, the system would be able to restore his damaged body? The young man couldn't believe what he was reading. Could they really be giving him another chance? His brain was beginning to suffer from a lack of oxygen. His pulse was about to stop. He had to make a decision as quickly as possible. The choice was made. The system began extracting his body. The structural changes necessary for this choice began to occur in his body and consciousness. 1 hour earlier, Chuteng University. The girl is surprised. The man standing across from her is asking her to go out with him. The guy's friends tell her to say yes. If she does, they'll make the perfect couple. A multitude of red roses lies at the young people's feet. The young man suggested that the girl look around, even though she's a little flustered right now. The suitor noticed that the girl is standing in the center of his heart, strewn with 1,000 roses. He thinks it's very romantic. The girl told him to stop. The suitor said that wasn't all. There was something else. The young man was holding a box, which he opened slightly. He said there was a magical crystal inside that he had worked hard to retrieve from the dungeon. The young man remarked that if he sold this crystal, it would be worth at least 200,000. He had deliberately stayed here to propose and give it to her as a gift. The girl was surprised. Could this guy really have been in the dungeon? She thought that the dungeon wasn't a place for ordinary people. Her suitor replied that it was true. Couldn't she see who he was? He could proudly say that no one else in the entire university could get into the dungeon except him. A young man appeared beside the girl and quietly told her to leave. The boy crouched down in front of the roses and said they were arranged unevenly. He began to rearrange the flowers. The suitor's companions were surprised. Who was this boy? Perhaps he was the boss's new friend? The suitor continued to stand with his eyes closed, talking to the girl. He asked her to understand his sincerity so he would speak directly. The stranger stood up from his knees, looked at the flowers, and said that this would be better. The suitor, thinking he was facing the girl, handed the gift to this young man. The guy with the gift asked the girl to accept his love. He stood with his head bowed and his arms outstretched. The stranger pulled the hood off his head and looked at the suitor in surprise. The suitor's friends were puzzled. What was this guy up to? The young man asked the suitor, "Is he talking to me?" The suitor opened his eyes and was taken aback. The young man got angry, threw down the box, and asked who was standing in front of him. The stranger was about to give his name, but the suitor shouted that he wasn't interested. Couldn't he see what he'd been doing here? The suitor was surprised. Where did the girl go? The furious young man turned to his friends. Hadn't he told them to keep an eye on her? Why had she run off without warning him? His friends replied that this guy had blocked her path. He'd appeared out of nowhere, so they'd lost sight of her. The young man, looking at the roses, said that the order that had recently been established had been disrupted once again. If things are in such disarray, how could the young woman's confession possibly succeed? The stranger bent down again to rearrange the roses. The suitor thought that this guy was definitely crazy. What was he doing here? The suitor shouted at the man to shut up immediately and punched him in the jaw. The young man lost his balance and fell onto his back, hitting his head. Blood began to flow from his mouth. The girl's admirer couldn't calm down. He shouted that this guy needed medical attention. How could he do something like that? Did he really want to get himself killed? The young man shouted that he just wanted to help and that there was no need to hit him. But it was too late. The aggressive suitor kicked the man in the head. Other guys also started shouting that this man should be beaten up. How dare he ruin everything? As a result, the beaten boy was left lying in a pool of blood. That boy was Yin Yu Tian. The suitor's companions said that the boy wasn't moving anymore. He might be dead. There was no point in touching him anymore. The leader replied that he didn't care. This world had long since changed for him, and the law meant nothing. The suitor and his companions turned around and left the scene as if nothing had happened. Yin Yu Tian thought he was about to die. He felt cold, yet he couldn't even move his fingers. Yin Yu Tian wondered why he had lost all sensation. It seemed to him that he was beginning to hallucinate. System initialization complete, verification beginning. The results of the biological scan indicated that this was a native Earth species with no special abilities. Genetic parameters remain intact, no changes detected, host confirmed. Bodily functions were severely compromised. The girl urged the guards to run after her faster. Someone had just stepped in her way and given her a chance to escape. and then she saw that a fight had broken out and that guy was being beaten up. He had to be rescued immediately or something irreparable might happen. The girl stopped near the flowers. The roses were still there, but now no one was around. The security guards asked if she was sure they had been there. The girl replied that they had definitely been there since the flowers and candles were still there. A security guard said they had most likely already left. It was normal for them to have left the flowers and candles behind. Besides, there were no bloodstains. It might not have been that serious after all. The security guard said it was time for them to head back. If something really had happened here, they'd find out about it tomorrow from the news. The girl reminded the security guards once again not to call her ma'am. After all, she was just an ordinary college student. The security guards promised once again. Yin Yutian sat motionless on the bed in his room for a while. He could see that screen right in front of his eyes and couldn't get rid of it. The screen displayed a message saying he had a new notification that he needed to check. Even when he hid under the bed, the message wouldn't go away. Yin Yutian could still see it right before his eyes. The young man was frustrated. Why was the screen stuck in front of him? All pop-up windows in a browser can be closed. Why didn't it work that way here? Even when he closed his eyes, he could still see it. That window was still right there beside him. Yin Yutian shouted that he was ready to take a look, just so they'd leave him alone. The message stated that the person had fully restored their body and completed the system setup. They could check their status and view their skills. Only then was Yin Yutian able to close the interface and breathe a sigh of relief. Finally, that window had disappeared. It had even given him a headache. The young man thought when he'd been knocked down, everything had been so clear that it couldn't have been his imagination. What was really going on? That was when he'd first seen that window. So, had he really been saved? The information window reappeared. The young man flinched. A notification had come in that 3 new messages had arrived. He needed to check them. Yin Yutian was annoyed but decided to check all the messages anyway. He checked the messages and the pop-up window closed. After that, his eyes even started to hurt. He decided to take a shower and go to bed. However, another image appeared before his eyes, unlike the previous ones. Yin Yutian figured it might just be his imagination. He needed to get some sleep, and it would all go away on its own. Yin Yutian lay down in bed and closed his eyes, but the image was still there. At exactly midnight, the image had not disappeared. At 2 in the morning, Yin Yutian saw that the image was still in the same place. The young man sat up in bed and said he would go see what was there. A notification appeared stating that the user had 1 beginner's quest. It must be completed. Yin Yutian was surprised and gave the command to return to the previous interface. Currently, the user is on the brink of survival. His current level is 0. His ability to withstand danger is close to 0. He needs to level up quickly. To complete the task, he must master the combat skill, Newbie's Left Uppercut. He must achieve a 10% mastery level in this move. Yin Yutian decided he couldn't stand it. Ever since childhood, he'd hated such reminders of uncompleted tasks. Unread messages annoyed him too much. That's why he doesn't have WeChat or QQ. The protagonist decided he had no choice. After all, if he completed this task, everything should be fine. He figured it must be a simple basic technique, and in the long run it shouldn't bother him. Yin Yutian noticed that as soon as he got to his feet, he immediately felt a strange power filling his fists. The power, angle, and stance of the strike instantly formed in the protagonist's mind. It seemed unbelievable, but he had never cared about leveling up. Now, however, Yin Yutian decided he wouldn't let the phrase "not completed" keep appearing before his eyes. The protagonist trained all night. Finally, morning came. Yin Yutian sat down on the bed, sweat dripping from him onto the floor. He decided he would keep going because he hated leaving things unfinished. In class at school, Wei Wei showed the class his notebook and said that Yin Yutian had once again scored 0 on his English exam. Why didn't he want to study hard in class? Yin Yutian replied that he wanted to study math, so he didn't have time for English. Wei Wei pointed out that he had already scored 49 on the math exam and was the best in the class. His classmates thought the two of them were arguing again. The boy pointed out that this wasn't the highest possible score. He would only be satisfied once he achieved the top score. Wei Wei pointed out that if he kept this up, his English teacher would start to get on his nerves. She suggested he come over to her house after school and she'd help him brush up on his English. Yin Yutian said he didn't need that until he got a perfect score in one subject. He wouldn't be able to study the others. Besides, he doesn't do anything that would compromise his reputation. When the young man was at home, a delivery person brought him the punching bag he'd ordered a few days earlier. He refused to have it set up, saying he could handle it himself. Besides, he doesn't like it when people come into his home. After a while, the punching bag was set up and Yin Yu Tian got ready to train. Our hero began practicing hand-to-hand combat techniques using his hands and feet. 3 days later, Yin Yu Tian was completely exhausted and collapsed onto the floor to rest. By this time, several torn punching bags were hanging in his room. The outer parts of his hands were bloodied. This was the result of his intense training. The boy thought he must have already completed the task 100%. A message appeared in the information window stating that his left uppercut mastery had reached 300%. The requirements had been met. Now he needed to reach the 10th mastery level to advance to the next stage. Suddenly, there was a knock at the front door. The person on the other side asked if the boy was all right, since he hadn't been at school for several days. The protagonist opened the door and saw his classmate Wei Wei standing on the threshold. She asked why Yin Yu Tian was only coming out now. Why was his face so pale? He looked as if all the life had been sucked out of him. Yin Yu Tian lost his balance and started to fall. The girl caught him. He said he was terribly hungry. A short while later, the two young people were already at a fast food restaurant. Wei Wei noticed that this guy was organized even when he was hungry and eating. Yin Yu Tian neatly arranged the French fries in front of him and placed the burgers next to them. The young man began eating the fries one by one in order, as if there were some kind of system to it. Wei Wei smiled and thought that Yin Yu Tian was just the same as always. After the meal, Yin Yu Tian thanked his classmate for inviting him to eat. He asked how he could repay her now. Wei Wei replied that there was no need to worry since they were close enough not to have to talk about it. Yin Yu Tian remarked that he didn't like to be in anyone's debt. Wei Wei spotted a girl who couldn't get a stuffed animal out of a claw machine. She said that if Yin Yu Tian could win something, she'd consider his debt paid off. He agreed. The young people approached the girl standing by the claw machine. She was very nervous because she couldn't seem to win anything. The girl sensed a powerful aura and thought that this guy must be a master. Wei Wei was proud to be standing next to someone like him. She was surprised when she saw that the guy managed to lift the toy on his first try. It seemed unbelievable to her. However, the toy fell gently on top of the others. Wei Wei said it wasn't a problem. The girl just needed to wait a little while and watch closely. After a while, several toys were lined up in a row. Yin Yu Tian deliberately placed them one next to the other. The girl was puzzled. What on earth was he doing? Why was he just lining up the toys like that? What was the point if they couldn't be pulled out? The guy asked which of these toys Wei Wei liked. The girl replied that they were all nice. After that, Yin Yu Tian began pulling all the toys that had been lined up earlier out of the machine. The girls were thrilled. Wei Wei said that Yin Yu Tian was awesome. The other girl kept repeating that it was unbelievable. Wei Wei said she would take one toy, and the other girl could keep the rest. The girl was happy because now she had lots of toys. The young people were heading home late at night. Wei Wei said she'd heard that Yin Yu Tian had beaten up Wu Fan. Was that why he hadn't been going to school lately? The guy replied that it was no big deal, not even worth mentioning. The protagonist told his companion that they had already arrived. He wouldn't walk her any further, and she would go up to her floor on her own. He also promised that he would definitely come to school tomorrow. Wei Wei said goodbye and wished him good night. The next day arrived. Wu Fan and his friends were discussing current events. One of his friends told Fan that the guy they'd recently beaten up had actually survived, but he hadn't been to school for several days. Fan smirked and replied that the guy was smart after all. If he showed up here, they'd have to beat him up again. Suddenly, Wei Wei appeared in front of the guys. The girl asked indignantly, "Was it you guys who bullied Yin Yu Tian?" She warned them never to cause trouble again. Wu Fan and his friends burst out laughing. Who did she think she was, threatening them like that? This girl was really funny. Wu Fan walked over to Wei Wei and told her that her threats could have very serious consequences. He noted that she was very cute, so he would forgive her this time. However, she would have to come and play with them. Wu Fan put on a menacing look. On the way to school, our hero ran into some students who were whispering that this was the very guy who had angered Wu Fan and had therefore been beaten unconscious. Could he really have decided to return to school? Yin Yu Tian went into the men's restroom to wash his face and tidy himself up. A screen appeared before his eyes again, displaying a new message. The left uppercut skill has been upgraded to level 1. Status completed. As a reward, perception and physical fitness have increased. He was also awarded starter gear, the novice glove. At that moment, Wu Fan and his cronies entered the restroom. The young men were in an aggressive mood. Wu Fan spotted the very same guy he had recently beaten up. He said he had just been thinking about that fool. The young men surrounded our hero. Wu Fan admitted that he hadn't expected to see him here. It really is a small world. Yin Yu Tian thought this guy had come here to provoke him again. But where did he get that toy? The protagonist asked. You didn't get it from a vending machine, did you? Wu Fan said he'd come here specifically to talk about this toy. It seemed he'd asked a girl he knew to help him out. Yin Yu Tian was outraged after all. It really was the Wei Wei doll. Wu Fan swung at his opponent and said he was going to destroy him right then and there. Yin Yu Tian stepped aside and dodged the blow. He thought that Wu Fan's punches were mediocre. Our hero stepped aside and assumed a boxing stance, making it clear that he was ready to fight back. Wu Fan was surprised. Did this kid really want to fight? He ordered his henchmen to grab the scoundrel. The men with fists flew at Yin Yu Tian. Our hero braced himself for battle. The protagonist counterattacked the nearest attacker with a confident blow. His opponent was knocked down and sent flying far backward. The thugs were outraged. How dare this kid hit their friend? Now he was definitely in for it. Yin Yu Tian didn't wait around. He charged into the fray himself. As a result of his decisive actions, the attackers were neutralized. Our hero told them it would be better for them if Wei Wei was okay. Otherwise, he would return and show them no mercy. Wu Fan said that this guy had completely misunderstood. The girl wasn't hurt. After saying this, he lost consciousness. When Wu Fan was talking to Wei Wei, he was determined and told her to play along with him and his friends. However, Wei Wei wasn't joking around and was even more determined. With a kick to the jaw, she knocked the insolent guy out. During class, the girl was upset. She couldn't understand how she could have lost that toy. Wei Wei said that this toy was very important to her. Where on earth had it gone? A classmate said that Wei Wei was looking for some guy. The girl ran out of the classroom and saw Yin Yu Tian standing in the doorway. Her classmates were surprised. Could Wei Wei really be running to see some guy? Who was he? Wei Wei came out of the classroom and asked how she could help. Yin Yu Tian said he knew. The night before, she had been looking for Wu Fan. She didn't need to worry about it anymore. Everything would be fine with her. Yin Yu Tian handed the girl a toy and told her not to lose it again. Wei Wei was delighted and asked where he had found it. Yin Yu Tian replied that he wouldn't be able to find it again if she lost it one more time. Wei Wei pretended not to care since she thought Yin Yu Tian was just pretending and would help her anyway. The protagonist turned around and said that in that case he was leaving. The guy waved goodbye to the girl. The system announced that the user had advanced to a new level. The next stage of the quest would open soon. Be sure to check for updates in a timely manner. It was also necessary to complete the intermediate combined training. Yin Yu Tian shouted that he didn't want to see that window in front of his eyes anymore. Yin Yu Tian arrived at the sports center's boxing gym. Combo strikes were indeed much harder than a regular left uppercut. However, he had already mastered the left uppercut 300%. The protagonist decided to practice the right uppercut first and then master the combination punches. His perception had improved and his strength had increased. Our hero felt his energy returning. His body was recovering very quickly from exhaustion. His responsiveness was improving. Yin Yu Tian began to worry more about his stats. Perhaps his OCD had also worsened. The protagonist thought, no matter what the goal is, it will destroy him if he doesn't put an end to this. The girls watched this guy with interest. He'd been training for 3 days straight. Where did this determined young man come from? One of the local athletes was outraged. Where did this show-off come from? The athlete approached our hero and told him that this guy was doing everything wrong. He was Akita's first hard-style boxing champion. He declared that seeing how hard this newcomer was working, he felt compelled to teach him real boxing. He had mastered 70% of the right uppercut. Yin Yu Tian told the athlete not to waste his time because he needed to train. The champion was outraged. Was this guy really turning him down? The arrogant kid might come to regret it later. The girl played the piano masterfully. Just then, the door to the room opened, and an assistant appeared in the doorway. He told the young woman that they had found something. The young woman reminded him not to call her miss. The assistant apologized and noted that he had found the man she had been talking about. His name is Yin Yu Tian. The young woman was delighted and asked where he was now. The Akita champion asked, does this guy really think he's not good enough to teach? Or does he just want to challenge him? In that case, he's ready to box and show what real power is. Yin Yu Tian asked the champion if he was really going to fight him. The athlete replied that he wouldn't fight, he just wanted to teach the kid a lesson. Those present were surprised. Are these two really going to fight? Who is this kid? If his opponent is a professional fighter, could it be that eccentric guy with obsessive-compulsive disorder? Everyone noticed a young woman enter the room. But that was Fan Sui Shui. Had she come to watch this spectacle too? Kui Shui was absolutely certain that this was the very same guy, but how would he fare against a pro? This guy had helped her once. He's kind and trustworthy, straightforward and stubborn. He could easily get hurt. The Akita champion spotted Cui Shui and was delighted. She was the school's most beautiful girl. He had to make a good impression. The champion lunged at his opponent and landed a blow to his chest. The protagonist managed to block the blow by crossing his arms in front of him. The champion was surprised what had happened. It felt as if he'd punched a pillow. The system reported that protection has been activated. You must complete the training exercises and achieve 80% progress in the intermediate combinations. Yin Yu Tian said that real progress is only possible during battle. He changed his mind. The opponent may continue. The Akita champion was surprised. What is this guy talking about? Cui Shui thought the athlete was strong enough to take down a sturdy cow with a single blow. However, this guy not only withstood such a blow, but also mocked the champion. It seems he really is strong. Suddenly, a group of young people entered the gym. One of them remarked that it was quite noisy in there. Everyone present was surprised. Why had this man shown up here? It was Zhen Shan, Biao's younger brother. He said he wanted to fight too. Shortly before that, Wu Fan had approached brother Biao and asked for his help. He was holding a gift box. Wu Fan added that it was a reward. Wu Fan said that if brother Biao helped him deal with a certain guy, this ring would be his. Biao noticed that the ring contained a magical crystal, but where had Wu Fan managed to get it? Biao remarked that even he had had a hard time getting his hands on something like that. Wu Fan replied that he had bought the ring for 200,000 on the underground black market, specifically to show his respect for brother Biao. He had heard from Shan Yu that the ring had been stolen from the Fan family. Biao laughed and said that this guy was pretty honest. Tiger Zhenshan agreed and said he'd take care of everything. Fan thanked him for his promised help. Those present in the gym recognized brother Biao and his gang. They realized that anyone who crossed Biao wouldn't last long. But these were street thugs. Why had they come to the school? Security had to be called immediately. The Akita champion thought that when a crisis strikes the stronger side, only he could protect everyone. He declared that if brother Biao wanted to say something to him, he shouldn't embarrass the others. Biao told the athlete to get out of his sight. He asked who among those present was Yin Yu Tian. Someone had paid him 200,000 for this guy's life. The champion was surprised. Could it be that Biao was looking for this young man? The protagonist was also surprised. Tiger Zhenshan spotted our hero and asked, "So, is this him, Yin Yu Tian?" The protagonist tactfully asked what he wanted. After all, this man wasn't from their campus. Why had he come here to show off? Biao remarked that he didn't want to cause any trouble, but no one could resist a magical crystal from the dungeon. At that moment, the ring with the crystal was on the thug's finger. Fan Cui Shui and Yin Yu Tian recognized that very ring. The protagonist realized that this thug had been hired by Wu Fan. Biao ordered his henchmen to surround the guy and prevent him from escaping. The Akita champion declared that this was school property. He wouldn't allow other students to be dragged into this. The athlete expressed his willingness to fight Biao if that was what he really wanted. Biao shouted at the boxer to shut up and punched him in the chest. The athlete was sent flying far backward. Everyone present agreed that this was extremely brutal. How could anyone treat students this way? Biao announced to everyone that this wasn't a schoolyard fight. This was a real, actual battle. Yin Yu Tian blocked his opponent's blow by grabbing Biao's fist. Our hero was outraged. Why was someone constantly trying to drag him into trouble? Maybe there had been some kind of misunderstanding? The young man suggested that the thug just talk it out. Biao laughed. Could this kid really be chicken? The thug swung his club and struck. However, Yin Yu Tian managed to step back just in time. Biao kept swinging his club, while Yin Yu Tian dodged the blows. The protagonist thought that it wouldn't be easy to deal with an opponent like this. Tiger Zhenshan noted that this kid was very agile and shouted loudly in rage. The thug declared that he wanted to see if this kid could dodge even one more time. Biao drew another weapon, a long spear. Yin Yu Tian and everyone present were surprised. Could the thug really have such a long weapon now? What on earth was going on here? Biao had transformed into the sixth weapon king. Cui Shui asked her bodyguard if this guy was gifted. The bodyguard, Ben, thought that there had been changes in this man's strength, but he hadn't fully awakened his abilities yet. Several decades ago, the world suddenly changed. Various monsters began to appear. Some people began to discover superpowers within themselves to fight these monsters. These people were called gifted ones. A superpower can be awakened only once. and it is classified into levels S, A, B, C, D, E, and F. A gifted one who reaches S rank is capable of becoming the supreme ruler of all humanity, surpassing all ruling classes. The age of martial arts has returned to the world. The man said he was meant to become a bearer of power. A wandering sorcerer told him that by becoming stronger, he could transcend the limits of the gifted. What a pity that he was too skinny and ended up here. However, even so, the power of awakening granted him a sturdy physique and the ability to enhance his weapons. Biao activated the Twisted Dragon Arrow skill and shouted that this guy was about to be destroyed. The champion had heard of Biao's power, but right now he couldn't even move a finger. The athlete hadn't expected Yin Yutian to accept this challenge so resolutely. Could this kid really handle what he himself couldn't withstand? The champion shouted for Yin Yutian to run away immediately if he wanted to stay alive. The protagonist dodged the blow and his opponent's spear flew past him. Yin Yutian spun around and prepared to counterattack his assailant. Biao didn't expect this turn of events, and he was caught off guard. The thug was completely exposed to his opponent's strike. Our hero landed a series of powerful blows to Zhen Shan's unguarded body. The athlete thought that this guy had adopted his fighting style. The system reported that the intermediate combination training had been completed 100%. The beating of the thug continued. The protagonist's perception and physical conditioning improved. After another powerful blow, the Zhen Shan tiger was sent flying off the ground and into the distance. The intermediate combination training had been completed at 300%. The assistants ran up to Biao and asked if he was okay. Biao was furious. Did they really dare to mess with someone who possessed real power? Biao asked his opponent if he was from the Fan family. The protagonist replied that he didn't know of any such family. His name was Yin Yutian. Tiger Zhen Shan conceded defeat and said they were leaving. The Akita champion looked at our hero and thought that this guy was quite strong. Fan Shui thought he was hiding his true strength. He's quite an interesting character. The girl told her assistant to keep an eye on this guy. She wants to find out how many more secrets he has. Biao decided he'd come across a truly gifted individual. What is a person with such abilities doing at this university? Someone called out to the thug and ordered him to stop. The man showed his ID and said that Biao should understand what that meant. Tiger Zhen Shan realized that he was facing representatives of the Fang family. Back in the day, Biao had dreamed of joining the Fang household, but was rejected because he hadn't fully awakened. Could it be that they wanted to invite him today? The stranger said that Biao had used his powers against ordinary people and committed many despicable acts. In doing so, he had violated the rules of the Awakening Association. Since Biao had not yet fully awakened, this was merely a warning. If it happened again, he would be completely stripped of his powers. The girl approached the protagonist and greeted her classmate. Fan Shui said she wanted to thank the boy for his help. Yin Yutian recognized the girl and asked who she was. Kui Shui was surprised. What kind of face was he making? It was as if he'd seen something disgusting. The girl introduced herself and said her name was Fan Shui. Thanks to this guy, she'd managed to escape in the small park. Yin Yutian glanced down at her chest and thought her neckline was asymmetrical. The young man grabbed his own hand and decided he had to control himself, even though it was difficult for him to do so. Cui Shui was frightened. What was happening to her classmate Yin Yutian? The boy shouted that he couldn't take it anymore and grabbed the girl by the shoulders. Cui Shui was startled, blushed with embarrassment, and screamed loudly. The girl instinctively slapped the young man across the cheek. She shouted angrily, "What is this scoundrel doing?" Security guards from the Fan family were watching the young woman intently from their hiding place in the bushes. One of them was ready to rush to her aid, but the other said they should wait since she hadn't called for help. Cui Shui asked indignantly how he dared to touch her. If he hadn't helped her back then, he'd be in big trouble now. The young man asked the girl to calm down. Yin Yutian told Cui Shui to stop dressing like that. Fan Shui declared that what she wore was none of his business. What kind of look was that? She wouldn't let him harass her. Yin Yutian had really made her angry. The girl realized that since the young man had helped her once, she would give him a chance to explain himself. Yin Yutian turned around and, as he walked away, told Cui Shui not to show her face to him dressed like that. The girl thought that this guy had been hitting on her, only to then look at her with disgust. No one had ever dared to treat her that way before. She was furious. The girl called the security guards. Ben said he was ready to take that guy out immediately if she gave the order. Cui Shui ordered them not to touch him, but to keep a close eye on him. Yin Yutian walked away, leaving the university grounds. He needed to calm down and get his thoughts in order. An information window appeared before our hero's eyes. The system reported that he had reached a new skill level. His physical fitness and perception had improved. A new task appeared: to complete training in the sidekick. Recently, our hero had noticed something important. His level of perception was much higher than that of ordinary people. Yin Yu Tian wondered, maybe it was all due to his obsessive-compulsive disorder? The more severe the disorder, the sharper his perception and the faster he levels up. He also discovered that by using his perception, he could instantly master new skills simply by observing, such as that guy's kick. Thanks to this, his skill could improve exponentially. It was as if there were no limits and he was capable of exceeding 100% several times in a row. Yin Yu Tian thought that if he kept training, he might even exceed the target by 300%. Watching the grasshopper, the protagonist tried to replicate its maneuver and leaped high into the air in front of the fence. Yin Yu Tian had no idea what this system was or what it wanted from him, but he believed that by completing the tasks, he would be able to break free from its constraints, rid himself of the pop-up notifications, and breathe deeply. The protagonist jumped over the high fence with little effort. At 5 in the morning, our hero was practicing his kicks against a punching bag. By 8 o'clock, the young man was already taking a shower, having finished his workout. Half an hour later, his to-do list for the day was ready. 10 minutes later, the young man left the apartment. However, he felt his obsessive-compulsive disorder flaring up. Near the elevator, a neighbor asked the young man if his name was Yin Yu Tian. If he was going to school, she needed to make sure he had locked the door before leaving. The protagonist panicked. Had he really closed the door? He turned around and ran back to check. The door was closed. To avoid being late for school, he had to run very fast. Yin Yu Tian was already feeling tired. A group of young people approached Yin Yu Tian. Our hero was surprised. What does Sen Shi want? The young people bowed and greeted their boss. Seng Shi said that the members of the boxing club had unanimously elected Yin Yu Tian as their new leader. He expressed his hope that from that moment on, Yin Yu Tian would always lead them to new heights in the world of combat. All the athletes asked the boss to teach them how to fight properly. Yin Yu Tian felt annoyed. The protagonist turned around and ran away. He shouted for them to leave him alone. On the way, Wei Wei ran into the young man and greeted him, but he kept running. Bystanders wondered who this Yin Yu Tian really was, especially with such a large entourage. Could he really be the heir to the 4 families that everyone was talking about? Yin Yu Tian managed to escape his pursuers by hiding around a corner. He wondered, when had he become so unlucky? The protagonist turned around and saw strangers standing before him. One of them greeted him and said they were envoys from the Fang family. In this part of the city, they represented the Awakening Association. Rumors had reached them that this young man was a newly awakened hunter. The man handed him a card and said they'd like to invite him to join their training unit. He could join their hunters to find and protect the treasures of the dungeons. The Fan family had assembled an army of hunters. The man assumed Yin Yu Tian might have some questions. In this world, hunters and ordinary people are as different as night and day. After the events that took place several decades ago, people had been living in a false world created by the state, believing it to be peaceful and safe. The man said that Yin Yu Tian had thought the same way before his awakening, but if he joined the ranks of the hunters, he would realize that this was not the case. The protagonist asked what he would get in return. The representative of the Fan family nodded, and his assistant brought out a red box. Inside the box were numerous hunting knives. Yin Yu Tian noted the perfect gradient and how they were sorted by size. He had never experienced such feelings before. It was a true delight for his obsessive-compulsive disorder. Yin Yu Tian grabbed the box and realized he didn't use throwing knives. The man said that in that case, the young man should return them. Yin Yu Tian refused to hand over the box and said he would think about it. The other man assumed that this could be taken as consent. Yin Yu Tian ran off with the box in his hands and at some point stepped through the portal. The system reported that energy fluctuations had been detected in the vicinity and that they needed to prepare for battle. The protagonist was surprised. Could an enemy really have been detected? Our hero saw a man standing before him and thought that something was off about this person. The next moment, a huge snake-like monster appeared before our hero. The man, holding a pocket watch, said that the trial was beginning. Yin Yu Tian dropped the box and the knives scattered everywhere. The young man was truly terrified. What kind of monster was this? It was a python, a D-level monster. It possessed the poisonous acid attack skill and was extremely aggressive. Yin Yu Tian decided to flee from the monster to avoid any negative consequences. However, the young man ran into an artificial barrier. He couldn't get past it because he lacked B-rank power. Yin Yu Tian honestly didn't understand how this terrifying creature had appeared here. He assumed that none of this was real and that it was all an illusion. The python opened its jaws, and the young man caught a whiff of a foul stench. The system reported that the protective function of the novice gloves item had been activated to help prevent hypothermia. Yin Yu Tian was surprised. If the internal protection had been triggered, did that mean the venom was real? The protagonist leaped high into the air, dodging the snake's attack. He decided to find somewhere to hide. The man sent a telepathic message stating that the boy was inside the barrier he had created. At first glance, it looked as if Yin Yu Tian was still on school grounds, but in reality, he was inside a magical trap located dozens of miles away. The monster was also real. If Yin Yu Tian didn't take this seriously, he would be devoured by this creature in an instant. The man glanced at his watch and decided to see how long this guy would last. Yin Yu Tian figured that retreating wouldn't help him. He had to go on the offensive. He attacked the python. However, the monster had hard scales and our hero cut his hand until it bled. The young man thought that even a fist trained to 300% of its capacity couldn't handle this snake. Yin Yu Tian started running away again. The young man decided this was a scam, since the creature had powerful defensive armor. Besides, he didn't even have a weapon in his hands. The protagonist ran to his box and grabbed one of the knives. Now that he was armed, he could at least try to do something. Yin Yu Tian lunged at the snake and stabbed it with the dagger. However, the scales remained as tough as ever and wouldn't give way. The man watching from the sidelines thought that this young man still lacked enough strength. Meanwhile, our hero was still trying to pierce the snake's body with the dagger. The man decided that this young man could hope for an F rank at best. He wasn't cut out for anything more. The man wondered, could it really be that this young man had caught the attention of the one who had then ordered him to be recruited? Yin Yu Tian tumbled off the snake onto the ground and began backing away to avoid its attack. This battle seemed too difficult for our hero. Although he was closing in, he couldn't break through the snake's defenses. The young man noticed that he was growing stronger again in this fight. At first, he was afraid, but now he wanted to battle this colossus. Yin Yu Tian thought that if he continued to use his perception, he would be able to discover the snake's weakness. At one point, the young man landed another blow and managed to pierce the armor. The python let out a loud scream and jerked. Yin Yu Tian lost his balance and began to fall. The monster flung the man high into the air, opened its jaws, and prepared to swallow him. The man in glasses noticed this and rushed toward the young man to save him. He grabbed the young man by the shoulder and told him to watch him. With quick, deft movements, the man began landing a flurry of blows on the enormous snake. The man landed on the ground. The snake had been cut into many pieces. Our hero followed him to the ground. Yin Yu Tian thought that this man was very strong. The protagonist carefully arranged all the knives in the correct order inside the box. The man said his name was Fan Dong and that he was the director of human resources for the Fan family's training unit. The bosom of their family is the birthplace of power and the cradle of the gifted. This means that with great power comes great responsibility. Members of the Fan family face such monsters every day. Fan Dong asked how Yin Yu Tian was feeling. He thought this guy would surely back out now, since a D-class monster had been used against him. Fan Dong assumed the young man must be terrified. However, Yin Yu Tian was in awe of the powerful strike the man had delivered. Fan Dong thought the strike was executed perfectly. Yin Yu Tian said enthusiastically that he wanted to learn to do the same. The young man added that he wished to join the Fan family's training squad. Our hero thought, if the Fan family only recruits gifted and strong people, would he be able to find a model of perfect strength there? Fan Dong was surprised. Why did this guy agree? Wei Wei was running across the school grounds. She was worried about what had happened to Yin Yu Tian. After all, he had run off without even saying goodbye. Finally, Wei Wei spotted the boy. He was talking to someone. Wei Wei looked closer and was surprised. Why was Yin Yu Tian talking to this person? Wei Wei came around the corner and said she'd finally found Yin Yu Tian. The protagonist was surprised and asked what Wei Wei was doing there. The girl replied that she had been looking for him. Could it be that the Fan family was bothering him again? The young man replied that he was fine. Wei Wei noticed that his clothes were dirty. The young man explained that he'd fallen, and this man had helped him up. Wei Wei immediately grew concerned and asked if Yin Yu Tian had hurt himself. A few minutes later, Wei Yi, pressing herself against the young man's chest, said that his heart was beating very fast. Yin Yu Tian asked her to stop. The girl asked anxiously if Yin Yu Tian had suffered any internal injuries from running so fast. The young man thought it was all because she was standing too close. Yin Yutian was annoyed. Didn't she know that he couldn't stand it when people invaded his personal space? Wei Wei needed to step back at least a meter. The mere thought of another person breathing on him drove the young man crazy. He couldn't bear to think about it any longer and felt as if he might suffocate. Wei Wei looked at Yin Yutian in surprise and asked what was wrong with him. Yin Yutian opened his eyes, looked at the girl, and thought that Wei Wei wasn't like other people. She was completely pure. Wei Wei told him not to worry, she would protect him. Yin Yutian replied that she shouldn't make a fuss, he could handle it himself. She didn't need to constantly be thinking about how to help others. Wei Wei decided that this guy had started lecturing her again. The protagonist reminded her that last time, Wei Wei had gone looking for Wu Fan. Didn't she realize how dangerous that was? Fortunately, they hadn't harmed her and had let her go. The guy asked Wei Wei what she'd just been asking about the Fan family. Did that mean she knew them well? A man standing just around the corner was eavesdropping on the conversation. Yin Yutian asked how Wei Wei even knew about the Fan family. The girl replied that the family was very famous. Didn't Yin Yutian know that? The Fan family is one of the 4 supreme clans. This clan has become the supplier of underground resources for the city defense ministry. It's a force to be reckoned with. It controls a significant portion of the city's resources. The car pulled up to a massive building. Security personnel were already in position. A security guard opened the passenger door and greeted the young lady. Fan Sui Shui stepped out of the car. In the lobby of the large building, the entire staff greeted her. Fan Dong also greeted the lady and said she looked graceful, more beautiful than a goddess. Sui Shui asked Fan Dong if he had met that man and what he had said. The man asked if it was appropriate to discuss this here. He reported that the man had agreed to join them, but that his abilities were rather mediocre and not worthy of the lady's attention. Fan Dong added that if Miss Fan wanted to see something truly worthwhile, he was ready to introduce her to a few newcomers. They were quite good. Sui Shui replied that there was no need for that. She trusted Fan Dong's taste, so there was no need to worry. The young woman reminded him that the newcomers must not be allowed to slack off. They must be thoroughly prepared. Sui Shui thought that once Yin Yutian showed up, things would get much more interesting. Fan Dong addressed the group of students and said that the mistress treats everyone equally and takes an interest in each of them. Therefore, they must work hard. The instructor told everyone to pay attention to their footwork. Had they not eaten well? Fan Dong told everyone to watch the mistress's gait. Compared to them, the so-called hunters, her stride was much better. At that moment, Kui Shui twisted her ankle and nearly fell. A guard managed to catch her by the arms just in time. Miss Fan blushed with embarrassment. Fan Dong kept his composure and said that their mistress was down to earth. She was afraid of appearing too perfect, so she had deliberately stumbled to make the huge gap between them seem less stark. The mentor remarked that this was what was called wisdom. From the window of his private office, a man was admiring the cityscape. It was the head of the Fan family, Mr. Fan Dekong. The door to the office opened and Kui Shui appeared in the doorway. The girl said that her father had returned from Gyeonggi. Fan Dekong remarked that if he hadn't returned, there would be no one to handle all the business affairs. His daughter replied that she still had to study, otherwise she wouldn't be able to earn her degree. Her father asked why Sui Shui was so eager to attend a regular school when she was so well off. After all, he was willing to do anything for her. The girl replied that she was just an ordinary student, not a hunter. Fan Dekong noted that the time would come when she would be responsible for the family business. Managers shouldn't worry about power. This family is capable of winning people's trust through intelligence and care. Mr. Fan said he had already found people who would support his daughter. Fan Man and Fan Jio would assist her in everything. Fan Chunui also possessed outstanding abilities, so his daughter could rely on him. Fan Dekong said that rumors had reached him. Sui Shui had taken an interest in a specific person and sent Fan Dong to find him. However, Fan Dong is quite formidable. They shouldn't scare people. Sui Shui noted that Fan Dong had volunteered for this mission himself and had even sent a D-rank monster to test the newcomer. This guy is passing the test. If Fan Dong scares him off, then he's not worth it. The girl added that she sensed this guy was stronger than he seemed at first glance. She couldn't wait to find out how many surprises this young man might have in store. It's the weekend at the Fan family's training ground. People are flocking here from all over. The protagonist has also arrived. Yin Yutian looked around, scanning the crowd for someone he knew. However, the place was packed with people, and our hero didn't feel very comfortable. Everyone present was carrying a weapon, and they looked very expensive. Some of the hunters looked dangerous and unfriendly. The protagonist decided it would be best to keep his distance from them. There were a lot of people here. Could they all be newly awakened from different provinces? One of the hunters pointed out that aside from the military, all dungeon resources were controlled by the 4 major clans. Our hero found himself holding a number tag. The administrator announced, anyone who has received a number is asked to undergo the selection process. Among all levels, rank F is the lowest. After awakening, a person's level is fixed. Very few can fully awaken their abilities. Most of the awakened receive rank F, about 90% of them. Only 1% are people with abilities of rank D or higher. The number of S-rank hunters is virtually 0. There aren't even 10 of them. These hunters are powerful enough to rule an entire country. In fact, the city's army is under the command of a foreigner, the only S-rank hunter, Jia Bonyi. Yin Yu Tian joined the back of a long line. Here were those who had to undergo the selection process. When it was his turn, the girl told the young man to bring his hand closer to the sphere to test his strength. Yin Yu Tian held out his hand and the test began. The test revealed an F rank. Ranks below E are considered very weak, so no training programs are available for them. Starting at E rank, a wide range of career paths becomes available. Warrior, mage, archer, assassin, spellcaster, and healer. Yin Yu Tian was very surprised to see that Zheng Yuan turned out to be a D rank berserker. The other students were in awe. After all, this guy was D rank. Yin Yu Tian opened the information window. He was curious to know what level he could reach if he completed the task in full. Recruit Training Center, the man told all the students to come to him. Mr. Fan noted that they were all dressed in uniforms and were already becoming recruits of the Fan family. Fan added that from that moment on, he would be the instructor for various types of weapons. Legend has it that in ancient times, there existed a unique martial art capable of awakening inner strength. By focusing this power within the sword, the students would be able to strike a target several miles away. The mentor added that although they are awakened hunters, their abilities are nothing compared to the legendary power. However, alongside their abilities, their true strength lies in how they wield their weapons. Differences in angle, force, and speed can affect the destructive power. Yin Yu Tian looked at the mentor and thought that his strikes were perfect. Every weapon Mr. Fan had tried looked perfect in his hands. The protagonist thought that this was exactly what he should strive for. The Recruit Training Center. There were various halls here for fitness, sparring, and weapons training. Yin Yu Tian headed to the weapons training hall. Many hunters were already out of breath. Some considered themselves mages and assumed they didn't need weapons, since they'd never end up on an attack team. Why should they train for something they wouldn't need? Fan Dong was outraged. How dare they ignore the words of their elders? If they didn't know how to handle weapons, they wouldn't even make it onto the support team. Fan Dong shouted for all the students to go train immediately and to do so as diligently as possible. The hunter said he didn't need to know how to handle weapons, since he was a mage and needed to learn spells, but he couldn't even enter the dueling hall. Of all those present, only Yin Yu Tian trained diligently. A system notification appeared. The user must perform the stance again. The notification kept appearing over and over, but the protagonist continued to complete the task. After a while, a message appeared stating that his weapon skill, short sword proficiency, had been honed to 100%. His level had increased. Yin Yu Tian thought to himself that he had finally done it and leveled up. He could feel his perception expanding. Now he could practice with an axe. The other students were surprised. Who is this guy? Why is he so hardworking and has been here for 4 days straight? He's very diligent, but he's only an F rank. Yin Yu Tian switched tools and practiced his axe strikes. This skill was also honed to 100%, level up. Yin Yu Tian thought that next on his schedule was the medieval sword. It was a shame that the instructor hadn't demonstrated the perfect attack. He'd have to figure it out on his own. The young man understood that he couldn't reach 100% through simple training alone. A real duel was necessary to master this skill. Fan Dong noted that after a week of training, each student was supposed to find a suitable weapon. Now they could take that weapon and proceed to the dueling hall. All the students happily moved to the other hall, and only our hero continued training. The students wondered why this guy didn't want to leave. Didn't he want to have a good fight? Maybe he was afraid? The students believed they had come to hunt. Why waste their time in the training room? They say that once a hunter awakens, their abilities don't change, so further training isn't necessary. Everyone focuses on destroying monsters and uses the rewards they earn to buy gear and boost their strength. They think that's the only way to make progress. One student said that some F-level fool was swinging a weapon around in the training hall. Why is he doing that? The hunter thought it was just a way to get the instructor's attention. This guy was personally chosen by someone from the Fan family, but that's all there is to it. Mr. Fan happened to be walking by and overheard the conversation. He was surprised. Could there really be people like that among them? Fan Chunui said that Fan Dong was just an ordinary old man, but he was getting dumber and dumber. Fan Chunui looked at the student and asked who he was and why he was following him. The student replied that his name was Zheng Quan and that he was a new D-rank berserker. Zheng Quan added that everyone knows Fan Chunui is one of a kind. He is going to marry the daughter of the head of the Fan family. His future is limitless. Zheng Quan bowed and said he was asking the master for help. Chunui noted that this young man was quick-witted. In that case, he would put in a good word for him. If this young man truly held a D-rank, he would join the team no later than a month from now. He shouldn't waste his energy here. Zheng Quan said that Mr. Fan was truly remarkable, and he would treat him like a new father. Yin Yu Tian continued his training. His weapon skill, the ability to wield a medieval sword, was honed to 100%. His level had increased. Yin Yu Tian paused and said that he was finally done. The system reported that he had acquired a new skill, Inner Strength. Inner Strength increases the user's attack power by 20%. The user's defense is also increased. Now the user can use willpower to deal more damage to a target with a mastered weapon. Yin Yu Tian wondered, could Inner Strength be the same thing the elder had mentioned earlier? Our hero noted that he was now skilled in the use of all types of weapons. The protagonist decided he needed to test this in battle and headed to another hall. Yin Yu Tian saw a portal and realized it led to the combat zone. It looked quite impressive. The instructor at the entrance said that this student was not allowed to enter. The portal to the combat zone is intended exclusively for those who have reached level D or higher. This student's rank is too low. He is not allowed to enter. The student was surprised. Isn't the portal open to everyone around the clock? Why can't they use it? Even low-ranking students have some abilities. The instructor replied that those were the rules. Preference is given to those who are more talented. Anyone who wants to file a complaint can contact the supervisor. The lowest rung of the food chain, survival of the fittest. High-ranking hunters can access the best levels of the dungeon and obtain more valuable resources. In every group or guild, 90% of the loot goes to the top hunters. The weak can only serve as support, covering each other's backs, or they are crushed like ants during guild wars. The instructor said that, of course, they must give the strong an advantage. The students have only themselves to blame for being born weak. Do they really think the Fan family is a refuge? Someone in the crowd said he had to accept his fate since it turned out he was a failure. Yin Yu Tian was surprised. Did people with low ranks really have no choice but to resign themselves to being failures? Yin Yu Tian told the instructor that a person's true strength isn't determined by an F rank. The man replied that he shouldn't act so tough. Before the real battle, many newbies will think their rank is higher, until they step inside and get scared. Suddenly, a hand appeared from the portal. The hunter said they needed backup. The instructor asked, is this guy from Zheng Quan's squad, and is he facing difficulties? The hunter confirmed this. That's why they needed help immediately. Zheng promised a reward once everything was over. Yin Yu Tian said that was just wonderful and volunteered to help. Others were willing to join as well. At the old cemetery, hands were emerging from the ground and monsters were appearing. It was an underground city. There was a demon from the other world here. The level's difficulty mimicked a D rank. The hunters were disheartened. After all, it was only a D-rank monster, but it was already insanely powerful. The monster was skilled not only in combat techniques, but also in magic. The hunters acknowledged that the boss was very strong. On top of that, smaller demons kept appearing as well. The apprentice asked Zheng Quan why they weren't retreating. It was just a simulator. There was no need to take such risks. Even if they didn't die, everything felt so real. It was enough to drive anyone mad. Someone had heard that a rookie from a previous team had broken his leg during a battle like this. Even though he hadn't actually sustained any injuries, he could no longer use that leg. Zheng Quan recalled his conversation with Fan Chunwei. He had been promised the captain's reward. The D-rank hunters said they couldn't give up. They needed to pull themselves together and tap into their inner reserves. The monster continued to smash everything around it and behave extremely aggressively. Zheng Quan, wanting to set an example of bravery and courage, attacked the monster but was immediately forced to defend himself. The squad commander said that fighting this monster was difficult. They needed to check why the person who had gone for reinforcements hadn't returned. At that moment, the messenger emerged from the portal. The protagonist and the other students followed him. Yin Yu Tian looked around and thought the atmosphere here was intense. It was an underground city designed for combat training. One of the disciples hadn't expected this place to have such a menacing aura. Another disciple calmed him down and told the mage to stay close. The messenger urged everyone to hurry. Brother Zheng wouldn't last much longer. The messenger brought reinforcements. Zheng Quan said that was just great. Everyone should join the battle immediately. A D-rank hunter spotted the protagonist and was surprised. Isn't this the guy who can only swing around metal weapons? What good is he? The messenger explained that only these apprentices had dared to come here. Zheng Quan immediately began issuing orders. They needed to surround the boss from the flanks and fend off its attacks. The commander said that the F-rank hunter and the mage would remain in the cordon and clear out the lower-tier demons. The mage asked in alarm what he was supposed to do. Yin Yu Tian paid no attention to the lower-tier demons. The commander shouted that the mage must attack the demons, otherwise they would become a hindrance in battle. Yin Yu Tian thought that these monsters wouldn't attack unless the hunters showed hostility. Our hero drew his sword from its sheath and headed toward one of the demons. The demon was a reanimated soldier. It detects weak spots and reduces the target's defense by 15%. Yin Yu Tian thought this was a difficult level for a beginner. It was time to test out the new fencing style he had mastered, as well as to use his one perfect strike. The protagonist swung his sword and struck. Our hero thought that the terror his opponent instilled in him was different from what he had felt when fighting a D-rank python. Now it was just an ordinary demon, nothing more. Yin Yu Tian executed his one perfect strike. The demon's health bar dropped significantly. The protagonist thought that this was the first time he'd used it in combat. The opponent was destroyed in practically a second. Our hero thought that even though he was only F-rank, E-level system monsters were no match for him. Yin Yu Tian dodged the demon's attack and counterattacked once more. The mage wondered why this guy looked so calm. Could this monster really be that weak? In that case, the mage decided to take action and approach the monster from behind. The demon spun around and threatened the mage with imminent destruction. The hunter got scared and said that this monster was too terrifying. What should he do now? Yin Yu Tian pushed the mage aside and confronted the monster himself. Our hero told the young man not to panic. A monster of this level isn't actually that scary. You can't let it throw you off balance. Zheng Quan and the other hunters continued to battle the boss. The squad leader was furious. No matter how hard he fought, the sword's radiance wouldn't fade. He had no choice but to resort to extreme measures. Zheng Quan raised his hand and activated the Iron Blood skill. The squad commander said that out of 10,000 D-level awakened, only he possessed such a mutation. It instantly boosted his defense and power. Zheng Quan called on everyone to join the attack. They had to block the monster's strikes. The hunters surrounded the boss and began landing multiple blows on it, aiming to destroy it once and for all. Yin Yu Tian continued to fight an ordinary monster. Our hero told the mage to stop standing around and do something, anything otherwise. What good was he? The demon stretched out its arms and began to approach the mage. The apprentice turned around and was terrified. The mage shouted that he didn't want to do this anymore and that it was time for him to go home. After saying this, the apprentice began to run away. Zheng Quan continued to strike the boss, though he didn't understand what was happening. After his attack was enhanced, his strikes became much more effective. The boss didn't even manage to land a single hit on him. However, the hunter began to notice that he was moving slower and slower. Zheng Quan speculated that the boss's sword might cause paralysis. The frightened apprentice ran past the boss monster and shouted that he was too scared. The group leader was surprised. Could the mage really be running away in the heat of battle? He must return immediately. At some point, Zheng Quan realized he had been paralyzed right there in midair. What should he do now? The boss monster continued to swing its sword. It was impossible to get close to it. Suddenly, the hunters saw that Brother Zheng had simply vanished. In the dungeon, teleportation triggers automatically upon receiving a fatal blow. If Zheng Quan had disappeared, it meant he was in mortal danger and wouldn't have survived. The hunters decided this didn't bode well for them. They wouldn't be able to defeat this boss. They had no choice but to turn around and flee. The mage made his way out of the dungeon and thought he was safe. The young man was surprised. Why was Zheng Quan here too? After all, he had just seen him inside. The squad leader said it was all because the mage had fled. One of the hunters walked up to the mage and punched him in the jaw. This guy must have distracted the commander, otherwise he would have been able to dodge the boss's attack. The mage said fearfully that he hadn't expected there to be ghosts in there. He was terrified of them. Other hunters emerged from the dungeon. The mission had failed and that very fugitive was to blame. Zheng Quan decided that this made sense. The mage was at fault since he personally couldn't have failed. The squad commander ordered the other members to beat up the mage. An F-rank hunter had dared to botch such a mission. At that moment, only Yin Yutian remained in the dungeon. He had successfully dealt with a low-level demon. Our hero looked around. There were no more low-level demons. Yin Yutian saw that the dungeon boss was still there, but the other hunters were nowhere to be seen. The boss's health was below half. Yin Yutian realized they had left him alive. Our hero decided he couldn't leave the fight unfinished. He had to see it through to the end. Yin Yutian thought he simply had to destroy the boss and began to close in on his opponent. The boss was a general of the undead army, a D-rank fighter. The protagonist leaped high into the air and struck with his sword. However, the boss blocked the attack by holding out his arm. Yin Yutian was forced to retreat. The boss has high defense, but his attacks are weak. If he's careful and doesn't let the boss paralyze him, he can win. The protagonist thought this was an excellent opportunity to fully master his new ability. The side glove's defense was automatically activated. The confrontation continued with renewed intensity. Zheng Quan told the hunters to hold the guy tight. He would beat him until he calmed down. The group leader said that if he hadn't been distracted by this mage, he wouldn't have lost. The hunters were terrified. If this continued, they might destroy the mage. However, the man was so frightened that he couldn't even run away. Even though there were people with abilities among those present, no one dared to stop Zheng Quan. After all, such are the rules of the world of the awakened. The strong are respected. Suddenly, a voice boomed, demanding that this outrage be stopped immediately. Zheng Quan stopped at once. Yin Yutian emerged from the dungeon. The young man said that, as the leader, Zheng Quan couldn't blame others for the fact that the boss had humiliated him. If he wanted to blame anyone, he should blame himself for his own weakness. He was clearly a loser. Those present decided that this guy had clearly lost his mind. Was he really that brave? How could he call the group's leader a weakling and a loser? An ordinary F-rank member said that to an awakened D-rank, he had definitely gone mad from prolonged training. Zheng Quan was outraged and let the beaten mage go. Now his attention was focused on Yin Yutian. He told the F-rank mage to try repeating what he had said. Yin Yutian repeated that Zheng Quan had turned out to be too weak. Not long before that, Yin Yutian had successfully fought a boss monster. At one point, the young man realized that the aura of the monster's blade had been dispelled by the protective effect of his gloves. He was in trouble. Yin Yutian knew that his opponent's sword had a paralyzing effect. He wouldn't last long. He had to time his strike precisely and defeat him with a perfect attack. Yin Yutian managed to close in on his opponent and landed a blow to his face. That was already something. The protagonist recalled his mentor's lessons and activated the halberd skill. As a result of this skill, the monster was struck and its arm was injured. Yin Yutian realized that the monster's health was almost gone. He had nearly finished it off. Next, he activated the axe skill. With the next blow, our hero split the monster's head in two. The monster's health ran out and it began to fall onto its back. Yin Yutian realized he had defeated the boss. However, the monster transformed and pounced on the young man once more. Yin Yutian didn't understand what was happening. Yin Yutian felt himself beginning to stiffen. But that wasn't part of his plan. The protagonist activated his information panel. He wanted to know if the conditions for activating inner strength were met. The system reported that to use this skill, the user must be on the brink of death. At that very moment, an alarm went off. The user was on the verge of death. The conditions for activating inner power had been met. Now the user could use the inner power for self-defense and attack. Inner power activated, the negative effect has been removed. The user may continue the battle. The monster was immediately attacked and decapitated. The hunter landed on the ground. He found himself back at the spot where he had begun his journey through the underground city. Our hero saw the reward, the Tear of Doom crystal. Yin Yutian picked up the crystal from the ground and wondered what it was. It was the reward for defeating the Phantom General. The system informed him that he needed to shatter the crystal to obtain the art of fencing skill. Yin Yutian clenched the crystal in his hand and crushed it into dust. The protagonist felt a highly concentrated aura envelop his body. Yin Yutian decided to open the skill window and check the necessary information. After reviewing the stats, our hero was disappointed. He thought he had fully maxed out his development, but had only progressed 10%. Were they really making fun of him? Yin Yu Tian told the group leader that if he couldn't take down a boss that someone weaker than him had already defeated, then such a commander was a real weakling and a loser. Zheng Quan flew into a rage and lunged at him with his fists. Yin Yu Tian dodged the blow with ease. The group leader kept swinging his fists for a while longer, but he couldn't land a hit on his opponent. At one point, Yin Yu Tian grabbed his arm. Zheng Quan felt pain. But how could this F-rank do something like this? Why is he so strong? Yin Yu Tian swung his arm to strike. Zheng Quan said he shouldn't be so cocky. Did Yin Yu Tian really want to hit him? The rivals glared at each other menacingly. Just then, someone shouted for them to stop immediately. Fan Shui Shui entered the room, accompanied by a group of security guards. The girl asked who had given them permission to fight in the training area. Security personnel were monitoring the situation via surveillance cameras. The footage was displayed on numerous monitors. One of the employees was surprised to see what one of the hunters was doing. A colleague asked what had happened there. The employee replied that nothing serious had happened. He'd just been bitten by a mosquito. The employee thought that the F-rank had defeated the Phantom General, and that this might be a data processing error. Everything needed to be double-checked. No one should find out about this, or else there could be problems. The agent pressed the red button to quickly restart the system. Despite Cui Shui's presence, the opponents stood facing each other, ready to clash at any moment. The girl asked if they knew what the consequences would be for fighting in the training zone for new recruits. The instructor ran up to the girl and asked what she was doing there. Those present were surprised. Could this really be the legendary only daughter of the Fan family? Fan Kuai Shui said indignantly that she couldn't believe a fight had broken out here and asked where the instructor had been looking. The girl looked at the mage and said he looked terribly beaten up. What happened here? The instructor suggested that this newcomer was too weak and might have injured himself during training in the dungeon. The girl told Ben to examine the young man immediately and report back on the results. Cui Shui asked if there were any healers present and added that the young man needed help. One of the female students stepped forward. Cui Shui was surprised that this young man could have been injured in the simulator. The recruit trainer was definitely lying. The girl thought to herself, if she couldn't do anything about it, she didn't deserve to be the daughter of the Fan family. Magus felt a little better after the treatment. He lifted his head and thanked the healer. As it turned out, there were surveillance cameras installed in the room. After reviewing the footage, Ben reported what had happened to the lady. Cui Shui was outraged and said that this was an extremely cynical act. The young woman stated that as one of the leaders of the Fan family's Association of the Awakened, she was responsible for the hunter's actions. She added that she was appalled by such behavior. They hadn't made any progress, yet they were already bullying the weak. They should be ashamed of themselves. Disciples venture into the dungeon together, so they must rely on teamwork and cooperation. While their comrade was being beaten, they simply stood by and did nothing. The girl added, if these students act this way, how can she trust them with her back in future battles? Cui Shui said that Zheng Quan was the ringleader of the bullying. This goes against the Fang family's beliefs. For this, he will be expelled from the training group. The student was frightened. Are they really going to expel me? The instructor said that he was one of the best students among all the newcomers. If the instructor expelled him, it would be a great loss. The girl asked, does the instructor really think he has the right to stand up for him? He allowed the students to fight and then lied. He is just as guilty as this student. Cui Shui added that the instructor is also expelled from the Fan family with no right to return. The security guards began to escort these people out of the room. The instructor told the woman that the director had asked him to look after Zheng Quan. Fan Ku Shui did not change her mind and stood her ground. The students thought their mistress was simply incredible. She was so dignified and noble, a true heiress of the Fan family. The girl turned to Yin Yu Tian. The young man was frightened. Could she possibly expel him too? Cui Shui reminded him of their previous encounter near the university. Fear flashed in the protagonist's eyes. The girl noticed this and thought he had misunderstood her. It was no use now to regret how he had behaved toward her that time. Cui Shui walked up to the guy and asked if he wanted to say something to her. She thought if he apologized to her for helping her back then, she would forgive him. The protagonist had another bout of obsessive-compulsive disorder and asked, did she really have to dress like that? Why was she standing right in front of him trying to look cute? The girl said that was awful. Yin Yu Tian was a total nutcase. Wasn't she dressed well enough? The guy replied that her shirt was asymmetrical and had different colors. The security guards thought their boss was beside herself with rage every time she met this guy. Fan Chunui entered the room and addressed Chui Shui. He said it was just a minor scuffle. Was this really a reason to kick people out? Zheng Quan followed behind Mr. Fan. Those present were curious. Who was this man, since he addressed the lady by her first name? It turned out to be Fan Chunui, the family head's adopted son. He was practically a brother to her. They say he's an awakened B-level and currently the strongest hunter in the Fan family. Chui Shui explained that this guy had been bullying others. If he hadn't been stopped, someone would surely have been killed. Allowing him to stay would lead to serious trouble. Fan Chunui said that Chui Shui had misunderstood the situation. He had accepted this young man into his team. From now on, he would take care of him, and there would be no problems. Fan Chunui asked for permission to handle this himself. Chui Shui asked what he planned to do. His brother suggested giving this student a chance. They could let the injured boy have his revenge and beat up Zheng Quan. That way, the problem would be resolved fairly. Zheng Quan thought he could handle it. Fan Chunui turned to the victim and told him to come over. Yin Yu Tian thought this was a good move. After all, no one would dare hit Zheng Quan, and the matter would have to be swept under the rug. Fan Chunui remarked, if this guy refuses, then the conflict can be considered settled. Yin Yu Tian took a step forward and declared that he was willing to do it for that guy. Chui Shui was surprised. Fan Chunui thought that the name Yin Yu Tian sounded familiar. Zheng Quan reminded him that this was the very same newcomer they had chosen. Fan Chunu thought that this brave soul must be backed by someone stronger. He said that wouldn't be right. Why should this guy hit Quan when Quan hadn't laid a finger on him? Yin Yutian said he didn't care if Zheng Quan struck him back. He wanted to end their fight. If he lost, he'd leave. But if he won, Zheng Quan would have to leave this place. Quan agreed to these terms, and Fan Chunui saw no reason to refuse either. Cui Shui was worried. Would Yin Yu Tian be able to handle it? After all, that guy was D rank. The protagonist closed his eyes and turned away. He couldn't bear to look at the girl. Our hero said that this guy would win if he wasn't put in his place. It had to be done so he wouldn't bother them anymore. Cui Shui asked why he was doing this. He had to look at her. Yin Yutian agreed, but told her not to come any closer to him. Fan Chunu was surprised. What was going on here? His sister usually behaved differently. Could it be that she knew this guy? Fan Chunui advised his protege to strike harder. Zheng Quan replied that there was no need to worry. The opponent was much weaker. The rivals began fighting with swords. However, the protagonist put up a decent fight. The onlookers were surprised. Could this guy really be F rank? He was fighting just as well as Zheng Quan. The D rank student grew angry. After all, his opponent was only F rank. Why was he still standing strong? For some reason, this guy is dodging every attack. What's wrong with him? Zheng Quan shouted that his opponent had forced him to resort to extreme measures. Now he would be destroyed. The protagonist continued to effectively dodge the attacks. Zheng Quan grew increasingly furious. His rage knew no bounds. Yin Yu Tian thought that his opponent was now definitely out to destroy him. Our hero decided to use his new ability, the art of fencing beyond limits. Yin Yu Tian effectively attacked his opponent and even wounded him. Zheng Quan couldn't believe that his sword had been cut into tiny pieces. How on earth had this guy managed to do that? The onlookers declared that Yin Yutian had indeed won. An F-rank soldier had defeated a D-rank berserker. Cui Shui told her brother that this young man had turned out to be stronger than previously thought. Fan Chunui thought this was very strange. This young man had used his sword as a conduit for energy, thereby increasing his strength. This was definitely the transcendent art of fencing. But there was only one way to obtain it, by defeating the Phantom General. Could it be that the test had produced an inaccurate result? Fan Chunui admitted that he might have been wrong. He couldn't have imagined that Zheng Quan was so pathetic. He had to be removed from the search party. Fan Chunui turned to the protagonist and suggested that the test results might have been inaccurate. The test needed to be repeated to prevent such misunderstandings from happening again. Yin Yutian replied that he didn't care at all what his rank was. It proved nothing. Cui Shui said that her brother was asking this guy to retake the test. She also thought the result was a mistake. If Yin Yutian were to achieve a higher rank, he'd be able to access higher levels of the dungeon. Didn't he think that was a good idea? Fan Chunui remarked that if his strength is truly that great, he'll be immediately enlisted in the sabotage squad. In the testing room, the protagonist was placed in the center of the testing apparatus. After a while, Fan Chunui asked the specialist what the result was. The girl replied that they would have to wait a little longer. The data was still being processed. Once the data processing was complete, the protagonist was once again assigned an F rank. His stats were unremarkable. Cui Shui wondered, could the machine be malfunctioning? The specialist replied that they used the best technology available, and the probability of error was reduced to 0. Fan Chenui thought, if this really is an F rank, then this guy definitely couldn't have defeated the Phantom General. Consequently, he wouldn't be able to master the transcendent art of fencing either. Yin Yutian thought that the source of his power was the system, which is why the device was unable to assess it. Fan Chenui speculated that someone might have intentionally altered the boss's parameters to help this guy obtain such an ability. Chenui asked if Yin Yutian would like to join the reconnaissance team and head into the dungeon next week. Yin Yutian asked, wasn't he already there today? Fan Chenui replied that today the young man had visited the beginner simulator, which is necessary to gain experience before entering the actual dungeon. He wanted Yin Yutian to go into the real dungeon since he was strong enough for it. Cui Shui objected, that student is just an ordinary F rank. It's too dangerous for him to go there. Her brother told her not to worry, it would be a very ordinary E-level dungeon. Yin Yutian thought that made sense. He'd make faster progress in real combat. In the dungeon, he'd be able to significantly improve his skills and get rid of that annoying system. The protagonist agreed. Fan Chenui held out his hand and said that was great. He welcomed the young man to the Fan family sabotage squad. Chenui added that they would meet next Friday and warned that once the young man arrived there, he might face some difficulties that they wouldn't be able to help him with. Various monsters appear in the dungeons. They are connected to another world from which monsters constantly emerge. The awakened hunters have discovered that they can destroy these monsters and obtain monster crystals. These crystals grant immense power and are highly prized. Over the past few decades, new dungeons have begun to appear all over the world. When this happened, all hell broke loose. From time to time, new dungeons would appear, while old ones would disappear. To gain control over a significant number of dungeons, the 4 major families assembled, special reconnaissance teams consisting of carefully selected individuals. A week later, hunters gathered in front of the portal to the Fan family's E-level dungeon. The rookie hadn't arrived yet. The leader of Sabotage Squad number 18 said that if the newcomer was late, they would simply leave him behind and go. After a while, Yin Yutian appeared, accompanied by Fan Chenui. The leader remarked that he could see great enthusiasm among the squad members. Were they really that eager to go inside? The squad leaders said they weren't complaining. Fan Chenui calmed the hunters down and noted that he wasn't scolding them. Fan Chenui added that he'd brought this young man along. Yin Yutian is an F-rank private. They need to look after him and make sure no incidents happen to him. The squad commander told the rookie to follow him. The team captain, C-level hunter Liu Tian, asked, does the chief really want us to take this rookie with us? The team's healer, D-rank hunter Lan Kimo, thought the guy didn't look too bad. D-rank hunter Qin Kaifeng thought he didn't want to get involved in this. D-rank hunter Lin Wu was unhappy that this guy had been forced on them. Be that as it may, the entire squad found themselves in the dungeon. The battle was about to begin. The protagonists had no idea what kind of monsters might be lurking in the cave they were standing in front of. It was an E-level dungeon, the Tunnel of Worms. They had to eliminate all the monsters. The protagonist thought it would be awful if the monsters turned out to be too asymmetrical. The squad commander told the rookie to stop looking around. Once they crossed the bridge, the monsters would start appearing. Lan Simo added that they needed to be careful they wouldn't be able to protect him all the time. The squad crossed the bridge and immediately prepared to fend off an attack. Haler bolstered their defenses. The commander noticed that the monsters were already approaching. A group of aggressive monsters did indeed emerge from the darkness. The hunters rushed into the fray. Yin Yutian wondered, had Lan Simo forgotten to cast a buff on him? The girl had told the rookie not to lag behind, or he wouldn't receive a reward. After hearing this, the protagonist also charged at the monsters, deciding he could manage without the buff. All the hunters fought bravely against the monsters, dealing irreparable damage to them. Yin Yutian proved himself in battle. Every swing of his sword hit its mark. The squad commander remarked that the rookie was fighting quite well and hadn't been intimidated at all by his first dungeon. Lan Chimo thought that, even considering his F rank, defeating him wouldn't be all that easy. At that moment, a huge monster with hostile intentions approached the healer. The girl immediately activated her succubus seduction skill. For a short time, she could control the monsters and command them as she pleased. In that brief moment, the monster was attacked and cut to pieces. Lan Simo thought she knew how to set up a little accident for the newbie. Just then, our hero grabbed the monster's tail and tried to deal significant damage to it. However, his sword turned out to be of poor quality and got stuck in the monster's body. The hunters exchanged glances. A plot against the rookie was in the works. The monster continued to act aggressively, while Yin Yu Tian fought with all his might. Another monster approached our hero. The young man was surprised. Why were they all targeting him specifically? Two monsters attacked the protagonist simultaneously. As they closed in, a powerful explosion occurred, accompanied by a surge of excess energy. The hunters exchanged glances and thought the rookie was finally finished. The monsters had killed him, so even an autopsy wouldn't be able to prove their involvement. However, Yin Yu Tian was unharmed, though the system reported that he had 0 invulnerability uses remaining. Yin Yu Tian activated the skill Transcendent Art of Swordsmanship, Phantom Path. Now our hero set out to pursue these monsters. As a result of his actions, the monsters were attacked and cut to pieces. The system reported that the quest was 15% complete. Yin Yu Tian landed on the ground next to the destroyed monsters. Our hero approached the surprised hunters and asked if there were any monsters left here. The squad leader replied that they had already finished everything. Yin Yu Tian said that in that case, they needed to move on to the next level. If the hunters knew the way, he was ready to follow them. Commander Lu Tian ordered everyone to follow him. They were about to face the boss. Yin Yu Tian noticed one of the passages and asked if they could go that way. He said that was exactly where the monsters had been coming from. The commander replied that there were only minor monsters there. If they took the other path, they would be able to fight the boss. Yin Yu Tian said that in that case, he would go through that passageway himself, and they could head toward the boss without him. He added that if he didn't completely clear out the dungeon, he wouldn't feel at ease. Lan Chimo was surprised. Could this guy have figured out her intentions? The commander said he wasn't sure the newbie wasn't that observant. Lu Tian added that in that case, the healer should follow him. If he starts refusing, it means he's figured everything out. Then they'll have to finish him off with their own hands. If he doesn't object, though, everything's fine, and the girl can find another way to get rid of him. Lan Chimo rushed after the rookie and said she would go with him. She explained that she was a mage and could heal his wounds and assist him from a distance. Surely he wouldn't object? Yin Yu Tian replied that he didn't care either way, but surely the others wouldn't need her help. Lan Chimo said that the other hunters were C and D ranks, so they shouldn't run into any problems. Lu Tian decided that the newcomer hadn't understood a thing, and that Lan Chimo would handle him herself. Yin Yu Tian noticed that it was getting darker. They should have brought a torch. The girl replied that there was no need to worry, she'd take care of it. Lan Chimo activated her mage's staff, and it lit up like a lantern. The protagonist looked ahead and was finally able to make out the monsters. The monsters turned out to be man-eating ants of incredible size. Our hero charged into battle and warned the girl not to turn off the light. Yin Yu Tian proved himself in battle. Every swing of his sword hit its mark, and the number of monsters rapidly dwindled. The protagonist thought that the E-rank dungeon was too weak. Could it be because he had already defeated a D-rank boss? This quest seemed too easy to him. After a while, the system reported that the quest was 30% complete. Yin Yu Tian said he was done and that they could move on. Lan Chimo thought this task was too easy for a beginner. She needed to come up with a reason to turn off the lights. He'd taken care of the monsters too quickly. Was this guy really F-rank? Yin Yu Tian headed deeper into the cave and told the girl not to fall behind. The young man stuck his hand into a crevice. The mage was surprised. What was he doing? The guy replied that if there were large creatures here, some of them might be hiding in the crevices. After a while, the system reported that the quest was 60% complete. Half an hour later, the young people emerged from the cave and found themselves at the edge of a chasm. Yin Yu Tian was surprised. Could this really be a dead end? But he hadn't completed the task yet. There had to be more monsters here. Lan Chimo noticed that it was quite high up here. The young man agreed. After saying this, the girl pushed our hero off the cliff. Lan Chimo told him not to blame her. The rookie had upset her master. The girl thought this guy wouldn't survive a fall into such a deep abyss. Lan Chimo was curious to see what reward they would receive for completing this quest. Humming a song, the cunning Lan Chimo headed back into the cave to rejoin her squad. Yin Yu Tian displayed remarkable courage and quick thinking. He thrust his sword into a crevice and prevented himself from falling further into the abyss. Now he could look around and think things through. Our hero realized that Fan Shinui had ordered this squad to eliminate him. The abyss was dark, and he could see nothing around him. Our hero concluded that he needed to find a way to climb back up. However, he saw no options, so he lowered his head and looked down. A dim light was visible there. Yin Yu Tian changed his plan and decided to go down. Using his skill of controlled descent with a delay, he began to descend. slowing his descent with his sword. Once he reached the very bottom, our hero realized there was water beneath his feet. The protagonist found himself on the shore of an underground lake. The water was glowing. In the darkness, the young man noticed two glowing lights. Yin Yu Tian was surprised. There were monsters down there too. It was an E-rank ghost moth. The monster releases a toxic powder into the air that weakens its prey, then destroys it with its razor-sharp stingers. Our hero realized he couldn't waste any time and had to avoid being affected by the debilitating powder. The young man activated his inner power and used the skill Transcendent Art of Swordsmanship. The monsters were defeated in the same manner. The phantom moth was destroyed. The system reported that the quest was 70% complete. Unexpectedly, the hero received a message that the dungeon boss, the armored insect, had been defeated and the quest was 99% complete. Yin Yu Tian thought that he definitely couldn't have missed anyone, which meant his party had been too careless. The hunters had indeed taken down the boss. Lu Tian was satisfied and said that now they needed to leave. However, Lin Wu pointed out that they'd only managed to get a few demon crystals and materials for a shield. Were they even worth anything? They just wasted their time in this dungeon. The captain said there was no need to worry about it. Manager Fang would reward them. Lan Kimo emerged from the cave. The hunters noticed that the girl was alone. The captain asked if Lan Simo had done everything as instructed. She replied in the affirmative and added that she had pushed the rookie off the cliff. It was so deep down there that the guy definitely wouldn't survive. Lu Tian noted that in that case, they needed to return quickly and report that the mission had been completed. Manager Fan would give them the appropriate reward. Yin Yu Tian thought if those hunters hadn't missed any monsters, then he must have been the one who did. This seemed strange to our hero. Even after searching the entire area, he couldn't find a single monster. Yin Yu Tian suspected that something might be hidden behind the rocks and began clearing away the debris. His hunch was right. Before him was a structure resembling an altar. One of its corners had chipped off, making it asymmetrical. Our hero wondered if he could repair the altar using the fragments lying nearby. Yin Yu Tian set to work and made some progress. After a while, the altar was repaired. A few cracks remained, but it already looked better. The bowl on the altar wasn't positioned exactly in the center. The protagonist moved it. The system reported that the conditions for opening the secret dungeon had been met. Now the secret room could be opened. Water from the underground lake began to drain through the floor, and its level started to drop. When the water had completely disappeared, the secret passage became accessible. Our hero had good reason to suspect that the remaining percentage was down below. Without a moment's hesitation, the young man jumped down and found himself in yet another dark dungeon. A monster appeared before the protagonist, the D-rank terrifying Spider Queen. The monster can use corrosive attacks, entangle its prey with webs, shoot poison, and possesses razor-sharp claws and jaws. Yin Yu Tian was surprised. Could a D-rank monster really be found in an E-rank dungeon? The terrifying Spider Queen showed aggression. Yin Yu Tian was attacked by a web but managed to dodge it. He thought the queen's attacks were slow and perhaps he could defeat her. The protagonist tried once again to dodge the web that was hurled at him. However, this time his attempt failed, and our hero found himself trapped. Yin Yu Tian thought there was no way out now. The queen began pulling the web toward her, drawing her prey closer. The hunter found himself in close proximity to the D-rank monster, completely bound by the sticky web. The terrifying Spider Queen opened her mouth and released venom. The system immediately notified the user that poison had been detected in his body. The hunter began coughing up blood, and his condition deteriorated significantly. The terrifying Spider Queen stretched out its legs to grab its prey. Yin Yu Tian thought he was about to die. The system reported that due to the neurotoxin, his body was entering a semi-unconscious state. The poisoning had progressed to 50% and was continuing to increase. While in a semi-conscious state, the hunter realized he was still alive. Out of the corner of his eye, our hero noticed that the queen was dragging him along behind her. At some point, small spiders appeared nearby. The young man realized everything. The queen wanted to feed him to her young. The poisoning had reached 62%. Sometime earlier, Wei Wei had told the young man that wherever there was a poisonous substance, there should always be an antidote nearby. Yin Yu Tian asked if she had really read that in a book. It doesn't work that way in real life. Wei Wei added that she wouldn't state it so definitively. Living beings do form symbiotic relationships. If something is poisonous, only those with resistance to the poison can live nearby. Otherwise, survival is impossible. Yin Yu Tian decided that this sounded quite logical. Now our hero launched an environment scan. However, there was nothing suitable nearby. Yin Yu Tian thought that in books this might have been fiction. The protagonist concluded that he had stumbled into a spider's lair and was now truly doomed. The poisoning had progressed to 70%. The young man noticed some ginseng oolong nearby, a parasitic plant with detoxifying properties. He decided it would be useful and picked a bunch of leaves. Yin Yu Tian noticed that the poisoning progress had stopped. This meant that these leaves had a passive ability to produce an antitoxin. The system reported that crushing these leaves could slightly reduce the poison's effect. However, the poisoning meter began to rise again. The poisoning meter wasn't full yet. The terrible spider queen screamed loudly and summoned her young. Small spiders began approaching from all sides. The queen ordered her young to eat this food and rejoice. The system reported that the poisoning progress had reached 100%. The poison analysis began. After a while, a message appeared stating that permanent resistance to this poison had been acquired. The protagonist hadn't expected the system to have such a function. Our hero's body began to glow. The queen also did not expect such a reaction and squinted against the light. Yin Yu Tian began vigorously plucking the leaves of the ginseng oolong. Yin Yu Tian regained his strength and grabbed his sword once more. The system reported that the poisoning progress was 0%. The poisoning effect had been lifted. Yin Yu Tian said he was full of energy again. The little spiders had been destroyed. The terrible spider queen screamed loudly. A web was once again hurled at the hunter, but the young man managed to dodge the attack. Yin Yu Tian doubted that the web could transform if it were cut in half, so that's exactly what the young man did. After that, our hero charged at the monster. The monster let out a loud, warlike cry and counterattacked the hunter. Dodging the attacks, the young man rapidly closed in on his target. Yin Yu Tian managed to get close to the spider and pierced its body right through. The terrifying spider queen once again released a dose of venom. Yin Yu Tian was forced to retreat to a safe distance to avoid being poisoned. At one point, the young man felt a sharp pain. He had completely forgotten about the small spiders. One of them had bitten his leg. Yin Yu Tian swung his sword and sliced the spider to pieces. The terrifying spider queen screamed loudly once more and activated her berserker form. The monster's attacks took on a new character. Yin Yu Tian was forced to constantly dodge the sticky webs. However, our hero noticed that the sequence of her attacks had hardly changed. He needed to try to counterattack her. The firebolts fired by the hunter hit their target but immediately bounced back. Yin Yu Tian was surprised. How was that possible? The protagonist was at a loss, for this was his strongest ability. At some point, our hero realized he had nowhere left to go. There were strands of web all around him. Yin Yu Tian surmised that the monster had planned this attack from the very beginning. The terrifying spider queen was indeed extremely clever. Yin Yu Tian wondered, why hadn't he thought to cut the web as soon as it appeared? The young man thought, if he started mindlessly cutting through the web now, things would only get much worse. The queen gloated. Her next attack was a burst of venom aimed at the hunter. Yin Yu Tian drew his sword again and said it wouldn't work on him. In his other hand, the young man held some medicinal ginseng oolong leaves. He had gained resistance to the poison. Seizing the moment, our hero charged at the monster. The young man reasonably assumed that the spider's belly would be unarmored. That was its weak spot. Yin Yu Tian approached the monster's body and delivered a devastating blow with his sword. The terrible spider queen screamed in pain and frustration. As a result of the fierce battle, the monster was destroyed. For a moment, the hunter observed the reaction and concluded that there would be no third phase of transformation. Small spiders surrounded the lone hunter. However, the young man decided there would be no mercy for them. He added that he wouldn't have gone looking for them if he hadn't needed to kill them all. The system reported that the quest was complete. The reward would be a storage ring. The level of his gloves had been raised to intermediate. His swordmanship skill had reached 100%. Yin Yu Tian thought that the real battle had greatly boosted his stats. The progress bar had also increased. Soon it would be completely filled. The system reported that the user had completed the underground city's secret mission. As a reward, he was awarded a puzzle fragment. Now he must collect all the puzzle pieces to restore the Bone of God. Yin Yu Tian was frustrated. Did he really have to collect all the fragments? Who would even bother with something like that? However, the puzzle fragment, the gateway to the system, had taken its place. Yin Yu Tian was puzzled. What is this? Could this be some kind of mandatory quest? Why does this system constantly make life more complicated? A mysterious fragment of the god's bone appeared. Energy fluctuations emerged in portals all over the world. The world's most powerful figures sensed that something was about to happen. When Fan Chunui met with the hunting squad, he asked how things had gone. He expressed hope that for their own sake, no one would find out that something was amiss with the rookie's death. Lan Kimo remarked that they wouldn't dare fail a mission assigned by Manager Fan. The girl explained that she had pushed the rookie off a cliff that appeared to be bottomless. She added that once the portal closed and his body was teleported out, it would look as if he had died from the fall and no traces would be left behind. Chunui said that was excellent. It could be considered a great achievement. Lan Chimo could expect a generous reward. Chunui asked what the girl wanted. He promised to grant her wish without fail. Lan Simo blushed with embarrassment and said she was willing to accept whatever reward the master offered. Chunu noted that the girl was indeed thoughtful. The master told her not to worry, he would definitely take care of her. Lan Simo blushed even more with embarrassment. The hunters closed their eyes and pretended not to see anything. Fan Chunui promised to give each member of the expedition a reward, but a little later, the hunters came to the debriefing room to report on their results. They looked miserable. This was done so that no one would suspect them. The administrator noticed that the mission details stated their team consisted of 5 people. But where was the 5th one? The hunters burst into tears and said that their teammate had died. Although he was an F rank, he had enormous potential, but they hadn't been able to protect him. The administrator said she understood everything. It really was a tragedy. Suddenly, someone's voice said that he had something to share as well. The hunters turned around and saw Yin Yutian appear. Lan Chimo was surprised. Could this guy really be alive? The other team members also expressed their surprise. The protagonist asked, did his teammates really tell the administrator that he had died? The administrator told him to show her his resources. Yin Yutian used his storage ring to pour out a large quantity of magic crystals. They were small, but there were many of them. The administrator was surprised after all. Hadn't the hunter been in an E-rank underground city? The profit from these crystals was impressive. A closed-door meeting was taking place in the Fang family's conference room. An assistant reported all the latest information to the head of the family. Foundation asked for clarification. Did she say that an unusually high profit was recorded today from one of the underground cities? What exactly are we talking about? The assistant replied that she was referring to the insect cave. The profit was more than twice the average. Fan Chunui couldn't help himself and jumped up from his seat. Could it really be the insect cave? The assistant added that a man named Yin Yutian had single-handedly brought in about 500,000 worth of magic crystals. Kunai Shui also jumped up from her seat when she heard the newcomer's name. The head of the family asked, "What's wrong with them? What's all this commotion about?" Chunui and Kunai Shui sat back down and said everything was fine. Fang Man stated that Yin Yutian was an F-rank hunter. He had joined their team quite recently. The young lady had personally recruited him. Fan Dekang remarked that this was quite unexpected. Could it be that his daughter knew this young man? The girl blushed with embarrassment and replied that the young man was a student at their school. After she saw what he was capable of, she asked Fan Dong to invite him to join the training group. Fan Chunui reported to the chief that the squad Yin Yutian had joined was under his command. They said that Yin Yutian had split off from the team without permission and refused to follow orders. They also said that he was acting strangely and didn't seem like a good guy at all. Fan Man looked angry. He said that this guy had been working hard, even if he was only an F rank. He had the best grades in the weapons class. In his opinion, this guy was a reliable person. He didn't seem like the type who would steal things. Fan Chunui thought that this Fan Man must be completely fed up with life. The assistant reported to the chief that according to the statistics on the underground cities, all profits were within normal limits. The figures had increased only in the insect cave. This fact ruled out the possibility of theft. Fan Dekong noted that even though this guy was only F rank, he was quite talented. Kunai Shui added that this guy is capable of defeating a D rank hunter. She doesn't understand why he's constantly rated as F rank. The head of the family said that in that case, they should officially make this young man part of the assault team. Since it was his daughter who recruited him, from this moment on he becomes her subordinate. Besides, he had long been considering allowing his daughter to participate in the company's affairs. Eventually, she would be tasked with forming her own assault team. Fan Chunui thought that Liu Tian was completely useless. Even such a simple task proved beyond his capabilities. Fan Dekang asked, "What's wrong with Chunui's face? Does he want to say something?" The young man smiled and replied that he was fine. Chunui thought that Fan Man would pay with his life for ruining his plans. At the university, the protagonist was listening to a lecture by a professor. However, the young man couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was staring at him, even the professor. After class, Yin Yutian and Wei Wei were walking around campus together. The girl asked where Yin Yutian had been lately. He hadn't been seen anywhere, and he hadn't even replied to her messages. The guy replied that he'd been too busy. His grades were pretty good. 2 weeks wouldn't make a difference. Wei Wei added that there were rumors that Yin Yutian had joined the fan family. Was that why? The guy realized why the girl was acting so strangely. Who could have let it slip? He said he didn't understand what Wei Wei was talking about. He didn't have any special abilities, and he definitely wasn't planning on joining the fan family. Wei Wei thought to herself, if he doesn't want to talk about it, so be it. The young people were walking past an alleyway when they heard a commotion coming from inside. A group of thugs was beating up a man. They were trying to force a confession out of him. A girl stood to the side, silently watching the scene. Yin Yutian and Wei Wei thought the bullies were picking on the guy. The young people stopped, and Wei Wei demanded that they leave the poor guy alone immediately. The leader of the bullies told the girl not to meddle in other people's business. This was their business alone. Wei Wei pointed out that it was unfair to gang up on a single defenseless person. Only complete scoundrels would do such a thing. The bully turned around and headed toward Wei Wei. He said he wasn't the type to shy away from hitting girls. When the villain got within arm's reach, he took a punch to the jaw from the protagonist. The left hook was executed perfectly. The thug was sent flying far backward. His accomplices caught him to keep him from falling. Yin Yutian declared, if they had any issues, they could discuss them peacefully. There was no need to beat someone up for no reason. The fact that they were picking on the weak showed that they were actually cowards. The bullies recognized this man as the newcomer Yin Yutian, but this guy was from the Fang family. The bullies turned around and ran away. They thought the victim had found himself a bodyguard. Wei Wei approached the victim and asked if he was okay. Maybe they should call for medical help? The beaten-up guy jumped to his feet and shouted at the bullies that they got what they deserved. Now he had an excellent bodyguard, and they shouldn't even come near him. Wei Wei and Yin Yutian looked at the guy in surprise. He kept shouting after the fleeing thugs that they were nobodies and weaklings. The protagonist and his companion turned around and went on their way. The rescued young man kept shouting something after the thugs. The young man turned to thank his rescuer, but there was no one there anymore. The victim looked around but saw no one. The next morning at the university, the protagonist witnessed a strange scene. The young man who had been rescued the day before was organizing a recruitment drive for the Yin Yutian Club. Although some people have awakened their powers, most are still ordinary people. However, some awakened hunters try to bully those weaker than themselves. The young man urged everyone not to put up with this. He declared that today, Yin Yutian plans to become a savior and help free them from the oppression of those who bully them. The young man added that he too had been bullied just recently, but Yin Yutian had come and saved him. The days filled with suffering had finally come to an end. The students decided that this guy had lost his mind. How could he possibly recruit at school? Could an F-rank hunter really protect even a single person? True, an F-rank might be enough for ordinary people, but what about stronger hunters? Yin Yutian flew into a rage, rushed up to the man, and asked if he had really done all this for him. The protagonist said he couldn't even imagine such a thing. This guy is trying to recruit people into a group created in honor of someone he doesn't even know. Our hero asked what on earth he was thinking. Did someone tell him there was a need for a fan base? Or did he want to ruin his social life? The guy replied that Yin Yutian's heroism yesterday had really moved him. It seemed to him that the newcomer was capable of changing the world. After all, Yin Yutian really does want to help people, doesn't he? Our hero replied that this wasn't the case and told the guy to get lost. He shouldn't pull stunts like that anymore. They weren't friends. A short while later, the students were discussing the news that Yin Yutian had gotten involved with that guy, and it had ended rather badly. However, that guy wasn't so easily scared off. During class, a classmate told Wei Wei that her acquaintance was back in the spotlight. Wei Wei thought it wasn't such a bad idea after all. It turned out that Yin Yutian's actions could attract the attention of the Ronin and their hidden motives. Therefore, caution was necessary. Ever since people's abilities began to awaken, those fortunate enough to possess such power gained an advantage over those who were deprived of it. Ultimately, the government began to take control of those who possessed any kind of ability. Many of them joined the ranks of the security forces. However, there are still those in the world who try to exploit their advantage over ordinary people. At some point, they banded together and began calling themselves Ronin. They pose a major threat to society. A guy noticed that some daredevil had shown up at the university. He's trying to assemble a group to protect ordinary people. Does this guy really want to declare war on them? Then he needs to be taught a lesson. The thugs spotted a man walking by, dressed in expensive clothes, and decided to attack him. The passerby was attacked and began begging for help. He was ready to bribe them and pay money just so they would spare him. The thug said the man had misunderstood everything. They weren't there to steal his money. The thug added that they wanted to destroy him precisely because of his money. They simply enjoyed hearing the rich scream. The thugs approached the man, intending to finish him off, but help arrived unexpectedly. An unknown man jumped down on them from above, knocked them off their feet, and pinning them to the ground, forced their faces down. The rescuer asked if the man was okay. The victim replied that he was fine and asked who had saved him. The rescuer turned out to be a young woman. She said they were guardians. Their goal was to protect ordinary people from the hunters. This guardian was Wei Wei. Late that evening, the protagonist was relaxing at home, lying on his bed. At that moment, a message arrived on his smartphone. It was from the guy who had caused the commotion. He suggested they go together to an abandoned dungeon. He signed off as He Zhishen. Yin Yutian wondered how he had gotten his number. Our hero declined the invitation to go to the dungeon. Late one evening after work, Fan Man walked over to his car to head home. A villain appeared behind him, knife in hand. Fan Man was attacked and killed. Fang Chunui turned out to be the criminal. He said that the old man shouldn't have gone against his direct orders and defended Yin Yutian. A card with a picture of a beast was left at the crime scene. A short time later, the head of the family, Fan Dekang, arrived at the parking lot. Doctors confirmed that Fan Man was dead. One of the specialists handed the head of the family the card and said they had found it near the body. Fan Daqiang was surprised. Could it really be the Ronin? How could they have killed a man in their parking lot? How could they have let this happen? Yin Yutian asked Lu Tian which dungeon they would be heading to today. Lan Chimo was indignant. Why was this guy here? The team leader was also angry, since they'd lost their reward because of the rookie. Lu Tian pointed in the direction and said that the C-rank raid team was over there. They were short on supply personnel. Yin Yutian could go with them. That's exactly what the protagonist did. Yin Yutian reviewed the mission objective. They must eliminate all monsters in the dungeon. As a reward, they would be granted the physical recovery skill. The hunters prepared to fend off the attacks of the monsters that had appeared. The group commander ordered the mages to bind these monsters. The mages activated their skills and began working intensely. As a result, the monsters were bound by magical circles. Next came the command to destroy the monsters. A series of explosions followed, and the monsters were engulfed in flames. The system reported that the mission's progress was 20%. Yin Yutian thought this was simply amazing. After all, the monsters hadn't even had time to get close to them. The squad commander said that the first wave had been dealt with. The supply team was to collect all the loot, while the rest would follow him further. Yin Yutian watched the mages depart. The mages continued to immobilize the monsters. The mission's progress reached 39%. Finally, the squad reached the C-rank boss. It was a Chthonian monster. The attacking team of mages once again launched a decisive assault. The boss was also bound by magic circles and engulfed in flames. Yin Yutian said it was simply amazing. The mages' power was truly impressive. The mission's progress reached 99%. The mages said it was time for them to return. The funds they earned could be spent on various purchases. Yin Yutian spotted a huge turtle covered in crystals. The young man shouted that there was another monster here and asked for permission to take it on alone. The squad commander told the young man not to worry. This turtle has very high defense. Even B-rank masters can't break through it. The mages added that while the turtle had high defense, it couldn't attack, so it was best to leave it alone. Yin Yutian didn't believe the turtle could be that tough. He decided to see for himself. Our hero was unable to break through its defenses. He had to admit defeat. The squad commander said it was time for them to leave. Yin Yutian told them to go ahead and not wait for him. He would try again. The protagonist surmised that this turtle was the remaining 1%. The squad commander said the guy was foolish, but he could return whenever he wanted. No one waited for him. Left alone, the protagonist continued to attack the turtle. After countless attempts, the young man once again realized that his efforts were having no effect. Yin Yutian calmed down and decided to think it over for a moment. Our hero recalled his mentor, Fan Man, who had demonstrated his skills with various weapons. The protagonist recalled perfect strike number 1. He executed the strike, and a small hole appeared in the turtle's shell. The young man thought that at the beginning, he could have landed about 10 perfect strikes. now only 3. But if he couldn't use this technique, he wouldn't be able to defeat the turtle. Yin Yu Tian tried to take his time and calm down so he could better recall his strike. After another perfect strike, the turtle was wounded and let out a loud scream. The system reported that all monsters in the dungeon had been eliminated. The physical recovery skill was awarded as a reward. Transcendent swordsmanship had advanced to level 2. After a series of perfect strikes, he was granted the ability Judge. This ability could enhance any technique to break through to the next level. Next up was the King of the Ice Wolves. After Yin Yu Tian obtained the title Judge, his strength increased many times over. The next monster was the Ghoul. Over the course of 2 weeks, the protagonist cleared several low-level dungeons, after which he became even stronger. Yin Yu Tian thought that the Fang family's low-level dungeons no longer posed any challenge to him. However, he was not yet qualified for high-level dungeons. He needed to find a new way to train. The young man became interested in the abandoned dungeon that Jishin had previously suggested to him. Dungeons are similar to mineral deposits. Many of them are monopolized by the government or large corporations. However, new dungeons continue to appear and may not have any rank assigned to them. Such dungeons are called unclaimed. Anyone can enter such a dungeon if they have a pass. Jishin waved his hand and said he would wait here. The young man wasn't alone. Jishin introduced the protagonist to his companion and said that, at the moment, this young man was a member of the Fang family. Standing next to him was Situ Yanyue. Over the past half-year, they had explored a vast number of ownerless dungeons. Yanyue is a star among solo cultivators. Situ asked why Yin Yu Tian had arrived so late. He'd had to wait for him for half a day. Yin Yu Tian pointed out that the meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock and he had arrived on time. Was Yanyue already looking for a fight? Jishin admitted that this guy had a bad temper. On top of that, he was very impatient. However, since they would have to work together, starting a fight wasn't the best idea. Jishin asked him to wait there. He would make sure they could enter the dungeon. Jishin approached the guards and said it had been a long time since they'd seen each other. The guards at the gate were surprised to see this guy again. Yin Yu Tian remembered that Jishin should have a pass to the dungeon. Could he have made it all up? Jishin told the guards that he had obtained 2 passes again. One of the guards looked at them and said they were low-level passes. This dungeon's rank was slightly higher, so the passes wouldn't work. Jishin asked them to let them through anyway, since they weren't just some random crooks. Jishin asked the guards if they liked the method he'd recommended last time. This time he had something even better. That way they'd be able to make even more money. The guards exchanged glances and gave the go-ahead. Jishin shouted to his companions that they could proceed. The young people entered the abandoned dungeon. The mission stated that they had to eliminate all the monsters. From their hiding places, the monsters watched the hunters. The hunters looked back and saw that they were surrounded by goblins. Yin Yu Tian thought there were too many monsters, this wouldn't go smoothly. Situ Yanyue snapped his fingers and activated his fire skill to deal damage to the monsters. The mission progress reached 30%. Jishin noted that this was to be expected. Yanyue really is very strong. Yin Yu Tian thought that this guy must be a mage. Judging by the distance, it looked like an S-rank assault team's flame attack, or even stronger. The group followed Situ Yanyue further, and the hunters found themselves in a new location. The group didn't know it yet, but they were already being pursued by a group of monsters. Yin Yu Tian looked back, noticed the danger, and immediately engaged the enemy. The mission's progress stood at 50%. The hunters said this guy was also very strong. This time, they were just lucky. Situ Yanyue scolded the protagonist. He said that no one attacks like that. If he breaks the supporting beams and the building collapses, he'll have no choice but to wait here for his death. Yin Yu Tian got angry and said he didn't need to be lectured. Jishin stepped in and said they shouldn't argue. It would be better to just eliminate all the goblins, since their priority was completing the mission. The protagonist spotted a hole in the wall. Beyond the wall was complete darkness. The guy asked Yanyu to illuminate the area with his fire. They needed to check if there were any monsters left in there. Yanyu declared that he didn't want to waste time. People like Yin Yu Tian didn't stand a chance against the boss anyway. Jishin thought that these two were both strange. One seemed to suffer from obsessive-compulsive disorder, while the other resembled a maniacal tyrant. Getting them to cooperate would be no easy task. Situ Yanyue said that if Jishin wanted to go with this guy, he didn't care where exactly he'd be loafing around. The other hunters decided that Yin Yu Tian was strong enough but too slow, so it would be better to follow Situ's brother. Suddenly, a huge monster emerged from its hiding place. Swinging its weapon, it charged into the attack. With little effort, Situ Yanyue attacked the monster and destroyed it using a fire-based skill. The hunters said that the monster was still moving. Wasn't Brother Situ going to finish it off once and for all? Yan Yue replied that he didn't want to waste his time. They could finish off the wounded monster themselves. Yin Yu Tian peered into a crevice in the wall and told his companion that he didn't have to come with him. He Jishen could continue on ahead with the rest of the group. Jishen replied that he couldn't leave this guy alone, since he was the one who had invited him here. Situ Yanyue and the other hunters approached a massive door. They assumed this was the boss's room. Yanyu used his skill to burn through the door, and the passageway was opened. The group entered a vast chamber. At the far end of the room stood a throne, upon which the boss sat. It was a massive knight in armor, sword in hand. The hunters were surprised. Could this be a goblin too? Situ Yanyue used his fire skill and attacked the boss. However, the knight survived. His silhouette emerged through the dissipating smoke. Yanyue was surprised. Could the armor actually be fire-resistant? The hunter decided to repeat the attack, but this time raised the temperature of the fireball to the absolute maximum. The boss monster activated a defensive skill, and the fire didn't reach it. In that case, Situ Yanyu decided to overwhelm the boss with sheer volume of fire. His attacks grew more intense. Yanyue closed in on his opponent and decided to shoot him right in the eyes. The hunter's attack was truly overwhelming. The boss lost his balance and began to fall backward. His condition deteriorated significantly. As a result of these expert maneuvers, the boss was destroyed, its armor shattered into pieces. Situ Yanyue said it wasn't difficult. However, this boss drops quite a few good materials. The leader said they needed to gather everything as quickly as possible. They were heading to the next dungeon. Yin Yu Tian and his companion met up with the rest of the team. Yanyue asked our hero if he enjoyed collecting the leftovers. He added that there were still a few materials left. Yin Yu Tian could go and pick them up. The groups went their separate ways. Yin Yu Tian said they were heading to the next dungeon. The hunters noticed they felt more at ease when they followed Sidu. Jishin saw a two-handed sword lying on the ground and wondered why it had been left behind. The system reported that mission progress was at 100%. Yin Yu Tian realized that not even any minor monsters remained here. However, just to be safe, he decided to check for hidden passages. Jishin noticed that the sword had begun emitting a strange and suspicious gas. The system reported that mission progress was at 98%. But how could that be? Yin Yu Tian saw that the sword began to glow even more intensely, and the concentration of the gas increased. Suddenly, the sword found itself in the hands of a huge goblin. Yin Yu Tian told Jishin to take a few steps back and not get in his way. The monster swung its sword. The hunters jumped back in different directions. Jishin panicked and started to run away. Yin Yu Tian didn't lose his composure and charged at the monster. He ran up the goblin's body and approached its head. The protagonist lunged forward and plunged his sword into the goblin's throat. The blade wind release skill was activated. The monster's head began to undergo changes. Its temperature rose significantly. The monster fell onto its back. Its head was engulfed in concentrated poisonous gas. Jishin said it was simply magnificent, a perfect, instantaneous annihilation. Yin Yu Tian wasn't so sure. He thought something wasn't quite right here. The goblin with the flaming, gas-filled head began to get back on its feet. The monster's head glowed, and it let out a loud scream in a fit of rage. The protagonist realized that the monster had been reborn. Now it was version 2.0. The monster let out a loud scream and charged at the hunter. Yin Yu Tian had said that this boss could resurrect, but it had a fragile body and slow movement speed. Our hero easily destroyed this monster several times in a row. After being defeated yet again, the monster did not respawn. Jishin noticed that the light was fading. This meant that after 7 defeats, the boss would no longer respawn. Yin Yu Tian remarked again that something was off since the light was converging on a single point. After that, the boss respawned as an A-rank goblin warrior. Yin Yu Tian was forced to conclude that the boss had evolved. Our hero faced off against the A-rank warrior. There was no room for error here. Yin Yu Tian was taken aback when he realized that with a single swing, his opponent had created 3 blades of light. Each of these blades of light was capable of dealing damage. It wasn't an illusion. Yin Yu Tian didn't know how to fight such an opponent. The protagonist was forced to retreat, but the monster rushed after him. The A-rank warrior closed in to a dangerous distance. Yin Yu Tian thought he was done for. The boss was distracted for a moment. Something seemed suspicious to him. At that moment, Jishin decided to show what he was capable of and activated the Shadow Taunt skill. He shouted that he would hold off the monster, and Yin Yutian needed to come up with a plan. The goblin warrior shifted his attention to He Jishen. The guy got scared, turned around, and started running away, since the boss had decided to attack him. Yin Yutian was surprised. Could his partner really use taunt? It even worked on an A-rank boss. This was definitely a high-level skill. How had this guy managed to hide something like this until now? The boss continued the pursuit, and He Jishen couldn't shake him off no matter what. The protagonist surmised that this skill was the hunter's only asset. In that case, he wouldn't last long. The judge skill was activated. His perception was enhanced to the maximum. The protagonist thought it was simply incredible. Now he could see their movements even with his eyes closed. Yin Yutian cautiously approached the monster from behind. The A-rank warrior anticipated his opponent's attack and managed to raise his sword to block it. Our hero shouted for He Jishen to stop his skill and hide immediately. The boss monster immediately shifted its focus to the protagonist and began striking at him. Yin Yutian thought that his perception was now much sharper. He could easily track the trajectory of his opponent's sword. The protagonist surmised that the boss was about to use some kind of technique. The young man decided he could anticipate the monster's movements. The skill chain of 5 light slashes was activated. Yin Yutian created a perfect replica of the movements and threw the monster off balance. Our hero was right to believe that his swordsmanship was far superior to the boss's. The monster was sliced to pieces. Mission progress reached 100%. The boss's body turned into a cloud that began to fade. The monster did not respawn. Yin Yutian said the boss had only 9 lives. He had finally managed to destroy it. The reward for the mission was the decoy doll ability. The doll can withstand 9 fatal wounds and immediately restores 15% of health. It also increases movement speed. After leaving the dungeon, Situ felt unsatisfied and immediately led the team to another abandoned dungeon, the Arctic permafrost. The hunters followed Siutu Yanyue along the route he had mapped out. The path wound through a snowy plain. Suddenly, an icy monster appeared in the sky. It was a B-rank boss, the bird of snow and ice. The hunter said it was an ice element boss. With his fire element, Situ would be able to hold it off. Another victory was just around the corner. Situ activated his fire skill and attacked the ice monster. The monster dodged the attack and prepared to counterattack. Situ noted that this bird was quite agile. He decided to overwhelm it with sheer numbers. The frequency of his fire attacks increased. The ice monster weaved and dodged the bursts of fire. Situ simply couldn't hit his target. However, the fiery blasts began to bounce back toward the ground. The hunters realized that the monster was reflecting the flames right back at them. Siutu Yanyue realized that this bird had a dual attribute, ice and wind. The hunter concentrated all his power and sent a single massive burst of fire at the bird. In response, the monster began attacking the hunters with shards of ice. Situ realized that his fire couldn't melt the bird's icy spikes. It was holding him back with its attributes. The hunter told his comrades that they had a problem, they needed to retreat, and he would cover them all. Sita added that he would stay behind and handle the monster on his own. Giving it his all, the group leader attacked the monster once more. Meanwhile, Yin Yutian and his companion left the dungeon, carrying out a huge number of crystals. He Jishen admitted that today's haul wasn't bad. Jishen said he would hand over his share after they exchanged everything for money and split it evenly. Yin Yutian replied that he agreed. He Jishen glanced to the side and said that their colleagues were returning. On their way back, the hunters were grumbling. Some said their hands were burned, while others said they were frostbitten. Situ was also unhappy. He Jishen asked what had happened and which boss had managed to humiliate Situ's brother. The hunters said that this boss was too strong. It possessed 2 attributes, ice and wind. It had managed to hold Situ's brother at bay, and they had barely managed to escape. He Jishen asked what this monster looked like. Situ Yanyue told the young man to stop asking stupid questions. Jishen apologized. Situ asked if Jishen had really only just now made it out of the dungeon with this loser. After all, he'd been warned that it was a waste of time. He Jishen showed off his loot and said that wasn't true. In fact, the boss hadn't been defeated. He had 9 lives and kept respawning until he turned into an A-rank boss. All these treasures were looted from him. Yin Yutian remarked that Situ's patient nature hadn't led to anything good. You have to do everything calmly and methodically. The protagonist added that he had managed to defeat the boss, but Situ hadn't succeeded in his task. It turned out that he was just wasting his time. Our hero told his partner that it was time for them to leave. He Jishen noted that that was all for today. He hoped they could work together again next time. Situ said he couldn't afford to back out. The hunter reflected that when faced with a powerful opponent, he had failed to defeat him and hadn't even protected the team. He had wounded his colleagues with his own attacks. It was a great disgrace. Yin Yutian opened the information window and realized that he had previously acquired the ability to restore his physical strength once a day. That meant with his full physical strength, he now had 9 lives. A message arrived on his smartphone. Cui Shui reported that tomorrow the training group would hold a competition to recruit new members. Yin Yutian was required to participate. The next morning arrived, the Fang Clan Arena. The annual selection process had been announced as open. Today was the day to seize the opportunity and enter a high-level dungeon. Cui Shui hoped that Yin Yutian would be able to show his full strength. The selection host announced that the groups had been determined. The top 8 finishers would earn a spot in the Fan Clan. He added that exciting spectacles awaited everyone. Cui Shui asked her classmate if he was confident. The protagonist replied that he couldn't say, since he didn't know the other participants. The competition began. The participants performed with dignity, demonstrating exceptional skill and superbly honed techniques. The host announced the next contestant, who would be competing on behalf of the young lady. It was Yin Yutian. Yang Yong was his opponent in this match. He was competing on behalf of Master Fan Dong. The host noted that one of the participants was a high-caliber F-rank newcomer, while the other had placed 9th last year. Yang Yong noted that last year he had fallen 1 spot short of joining an advanced raid group, so he had remained below C rank for the entire year. This year he was determined to secure a promotion. The contender activated the Fierce Tiger Strike skill. However, our hero was faster. He was the one who landed the first blow. Yang Yong took a punch to the jaw. The blow was so powerful that his opponent was sent flying to the edge of the arena and slammed into the wall. The protagonist secured victory with just a single blow. The host announced that the contestant who had placed 9th last year had been eliminated from the competition in a matter of seconds. Yin Yutian was declared the winner. Fan Daqiang told his daughter that the rumors were true. She had indeed found a real treasure. In the next match, the protagonist also scored a convincing victory. In the third match, his opponent asked for mercy. Our hero emerged victorious once again. The tournament host announced that the 8 candidates had been selected. Among the candidates were also hunters from Fan Chunye's group. The protagonist said this was unexpected. These hunters had stayed here as well. Qing Kaifeng said he had been watching the newcomers' fights and couldn't believe this guy had been so underrated before. The tournament host announced that these 8 could participate in dungeon raids of C rank and higher. However, the battle isn't over yet. There are 7 matches ahead, the results of which will determine the champion. The head of the Fan family announced that, to spice things up, they're prepared to offer the winner several special items, including weapons. The participant will be able to choose an item with suitable stats, which will make the duels even more thrilling. Fan Chunui told his team that he would rig the lottery a little and let them choose. All that's left for them is to take down Yin Yutian at any cost. Lan Chimo noted that this guy is very strong, and on top of that, all of this will take place in front of a huge audience. Chunui noted that he had already made all the preparations. This guy's favorite weapon is a long sword, so a debilitating poison has been applied to the hilts of all the swords. When he touches the hilt, the poison will slowly spread throughout his body. They just need to wait until he weakens. His defeat will be inevitable. Qing Kaifeng asked why the master needed to do this. If this guy is really strong, they'll face each other in the final anyway, where they can take him out. There's no need to use poison, it'll be too obvious. Fan Chunui stated that the person conducting the post-match autopsy worked for him, so no one would find out. Qing Kaifeng replied that he had no doubts about his mentor. After the break, the tournament host announced that the competition would continue. He invited the players to come up on stage and choose their weapons. Yin Yutian thought these swords had too many decorations, and besides, they were extremely asymmetrical. His sword was the best anyway. The tournament host said that Yin Yutian had chosen not to select a weapon. Apparently, he was confident in his abilities. Fan Daqiang remarked that this guy had a strong personality. His daughter said he had obsessive-compulsive disorder. Perhaps that was why he didn't like any of the weapons. Fang Chunui noted that the young man hadn't chosen any of the swords. The first step of his plan had failed. However, it didn't matter. Qing Kaifeng was definitely going to prove himself in battle. The bloodthirsty dagger in his hands was capable of draining a person's stamina if it touched them. Perhaps they could manage without bloodshed. Fan Chunui thought that, since Qing Kaifeng was an assassin, He possessed stealth skills that would allow him to strike with ease at close range. Chunui decided that even if this rookie managed to avoid the first move, the outcome would be the same either way. The tournament host announced that the participants had made their choices. The first round was about to begin. Yin Yutian and Lanchimo faced off in the arena. The girl was upset because she saw that her opponent was using his own sword. Lanchimo raised her hand and announced that she was giving up. She realized she had already made it into the top 8. That was enough to qualify. She didn't need to fight anymore. The spectators were outraged. Was this some kind of joke? If she didn't want to fight, there was no point in taking someone else's spot. Fan Chunui decided she had simply chickened out. In the second round, Qing Kaifeng faced off against He Yuan. Qing Kaifeng emerged victorious. The tournament host announced that the final match was about to begin. A clash between these rivals was bound to lead to a fierce battle. Qing Kaifeng and Yin Yutian entered the arena. Fan Daqiang remarked that things were getting much more interesting. He eagerly awaited the outcome of the match. Cui Shui and Fan Chunui were also eagerly awaiting the outcome. The rivals met and immediately crossed swords. Each was confident of victory. Yin Yutian fought bravely and resolutely, in no way yielding to his higher-ranked opponent. The battle was evenly matched. Neither of them had a clear advantage. The protagonist activated a new skill, greatly surprising his opponent. Qing Kaifeng was genuinely surprised. Could this really be the 3 blades of light? At one point, our hero was left alone in the arena. His opponent was nowhere to be seen. Kui Shui realized that an invisibility skill had been activated. Our hero stopped and concentrated as hard as he could. He began to listen and sniff the air, picking up even the slightest fluctuations in the atmosphere. Suddenly, Yin Yutian thrust his sword forward. At that very moment, sparks flew from the blade. Qing Kaifeng, using his invisibility skill, couldn't figure out how his opponent had detected him. Yin Yutian immediately activated his new skill, 3 blades of light. Qing Kaifeng thought, if his opponent hadn't blocked the attack with his sword, he would already be dead. What was going on? Could it be that Yin Yutian could actually see him? The invisible hunter decided to test his opponent's abilities and tried to close in again, thrusting his sword forward. Qing Kaifeng nearly thrust his sword into his opponent's chest and concluded that the man couldn't see him. However, Yin Yutian skillfully dodged the attack, and Kaifeng's sword flew past him. Kaifeng surmised that his opponent couldn't detect him until he launched an attack. The invisible hunter was surprised. Could his opponent really sense his thirst for destruction? The protagonist heightened his senses to the maximum. Even with his opponent's invisibility, he could still pinpoint his location, sensing the danger. The hunter thought this was interesting and decided to pick up the pace. Qing Kaifeng moved swiftly across the arena, but Yin Yutian was ready to parry his attacks. Our hero also increased his movement speed. His opponent couldn't catch him off guard. Fan Chunui smirked, for Yin Yutian had already sustained his first wound from the bloodthirsty dagger. Yin Yutian didn't understand what was happening. Why couldn't he keep up with his opponent's speed? The protagonist, having sustained multiple wounds, dropped to one knee and leaned on his sword. Qing Kaifeng reappeared, ran up to his opponent, and plunged his sword into his chest. The spectators assumed the winner had already been decided, but this was outright destruction, and that was forbidden. The long sword fell to the ground. Drops of blood appeared nearby. Qing Kaifeng laughed and said he felt great. What he was doing was a lot of fun. Kaifeng was surprised when he saw his opponent grab him by the chest and say that he'd been caught. Yin Yutian attacked his opponent with a punch to the jaw. Qing Kaifeng lost his balance and fell to the ground. The perfect right hook skill was activated. The blow was so powerful that Kaifeng was sent flying a considerable distance. The opponent was deactivated. Yin Yutian looked at his fist. In his other hand, he held a cross. The cross gradually faded away. It was a decoy doll. This artifact nullifies a fatal wound and immediately restores 15% of health. The wound on our hero's body had healed. Only his torn clothes remained. The tournament host announced that Qing Kaifeng had been knocked out. He had managed to pierce Yin Yutian's chest, but Yin Yutian still managed to launch a successful counterattack. He had saved his healing skill for a last resort situation. The tournament host said he was ready to announce the winner. Yin Yutian, an F-rank hunter, was declared the winner. The audience cheered and began to support the winner. Fan Daqiang rose from his seat and remarked that it had been an excellent combat tactic. The head of the Fan family noticed the weapon lying next to the defeated hunter. It was the bloodthirsty dagger. Due to its excessively aggressive nature, it should not have been among the provided weapons. The head of the family surmised that the rookie's chest had been pierced by the bloodthirsty dagger. Even with healing, he shouldn't have been able to recover. It seemed that in addition to his abilities, this young man still had plenty of secrets. The head concluded that Yin Yu Tian had managed to defeat a B-rank assassin wielding an A-rank weapon. His true abilities were in no way inferior to those of Fan Chunye. Fan Daqiang told the victor that a true genius had emerged in the Jiangshan clan. Yin Yu Tian is truly talented. No wonder his daughter has always admired this young man. Yin Yu Tian replied that the master was being too kind to him. Fan Daqiang expressed confidence that the young man wouldn't mind receiving a sword as a reward. After all, he himself uses a similar weapon. The head of the clan showed him the sword and said that this weapon was called the Last Clouds of Kuntun. He asked him to accept this gift. Yin Yu Tian thanked the master and said he didn't need the blade. Fan Daqiang was surprised. Kui Shui told the young man to show some respect and accept the sword. The young man refused again. Fan Chunui declared that this was disrespectful, since the master had presented him with a gift. How dare this scoundrel refuse? The head replied that everything was fine. Fan Daqiang assumed that the young man didn't like the sword. In that case, what did he want? Before Yin Yu Tian could answer, his vision blurred and he lost consciousness. The protagonist woke up in a hospital bed. A nurse peeked into the room and saw that the patient had already regained consciousness. The nurse explained that when the hunter lost consciousness, his heart rate had been irregular and he had been sweating profusely. No one expected him to wake up so quickly. The nurse told the young man not to go anywhere. She was going to call a technician right away. The protagonist surmised that he had lost consciousness due to the dummy effect taking hold. The young man realized he was at the Fan family's medical center. The skill description had stated that he would be paralyzed for 24 hours. How much time had passed already? Head Fan and his children entered the room. Fan Daqiang asked how the young man was feeling. The young man replied that he was fine and would be going home soon. Head Fan remarked that this young man had a very strong constitution. He had been struck by the bloodthirsty dagger, yet it had taken him only half a day to recover. Fan Daqiang noted that he had a good feeling about him, given his level of ability and his desire to follow Cui Shui. The chief added that if the young man didn't like the sword, he could reconsider his decision and receive whatever he desired. Fan Daqiang said they still had a lot to do, so they couldn't stay, but Cui Shui would keep him company. The chief asked Chun Yu what had happened, since he still had a lot of work to do. Fan Daqiang added that if that wasn't the case, they could find a few tasks for him. The bloodthirsty dagger used by Qin Kaifeng had been provided by someone from outside. Since this hunter was part of Chunui's team, it was up to him to find out where the dagger came from. Chunui replied that he understood everything. The protagonist guessed that Chunui had given the blood-stained dagger to his rival. However, they would not be able to destroy him. Chunui was furious. All these years, he had faithfully assisted the Fan family with their alliance and the recruitment of new talent. Every member of that family had sincerely admired him. What on earth was this old man dissatisfied with now? The Fan family had no son. Wasn't that the very reason Fan Daqiang had adopted him and raised him as his heir? So why was he now helping Cui Shui? Chunui had assumed that sooner or later, the Fan family would become his family as well. Cui Shui was meant to be his. However, everything had changed since Yin Yu Tian appeared. Chunui thought that the situation had changed and that he needed to contact his family. The person on the other end asked Fan Chunui why he had decided to contact them. Chunui noted that there were no surveillance cameras here, so there was no need to hide. It was safe to come out of hiding. The man stepped out of the darkness and sat down at the table next to him. He reminded Chunui that last time he had said he would soon become the head of the Fan family. What progress had been made so far? Chunui replied that there were some problems. He suspected that Fan Daqiang might be suspicious of him. The old man had begun to strengthen Cui Shui's power. There was a suspicion that he might pass his position on to her. Chunui added that he had tried several times to get rid of her subordinates, but without success. Now he didn't think he'd be able to take the position of head peacefully. His companion said that in that case, they needed to hurry and eliminate the family head. Chunui replied that he would need their help. Fan Daqiang is already old, but he still retains his power. Direct elimination is too dangerous, so he needs the support of the Qian family. His interlocutor asked what the plan would be. Chunui replied that the key part of the plan was Cui Shui. High-ranking members of the Qian family must kidnap her sister and then send a message stating that she is being held hostage in an abandoned underground city. Since there are so many such cities, the old man will send everyone from the Fan family to search for her. After all, she is his only child. There's also a chance he'll go looking for her himself. In any case, you can use this opportunity to separate the old man from his strongest warriors. After that, you can lure him into a trap and eliminate him. Cui Shui will serve as a backup plan. If the old man proves invincible and manages to escape, the girl can simply be eliminated. Chunui added that even if the old man decides to choose another heir, he'll have no other options, and will be forced to pass everything on to him. Fan Chunui was the Qian family's best undercover spy. His real name is Qian Yun. The spy added that, no matter what happens, the power of the Fan family will pass into the hands of the Qian family. His interlocutor said that in that case, he would immediately report everything to the master. They would begin today. Chunui noted that there was no need to rush. If they went about it too directly, it could lead to a conflict between the families. He had a candidate on whom they could pin the blame. The Fan family once again convened a general council meeting to discuss current issues. Fan Daqiang reported that the submitted trade reports had failed inspection. They had essentially been stolen by the Qian family. Executive Director Fan Wan said there was nothing to discuss. As far as she knew, the strategic reports they had submitted were rejected solely because the Qian family had submitted their reports an hour earlier. She would have believed it was a coincidence if it had happened only a second time. But this has been going on for several months now. Someone is leaking internal documents to them. There is definitely a traitor among those present. The chief said he agreed. What did Chunui think about this? Chunui replied that he agreed. There was most likely a traitor among them. The most important thing now was to find out exactly which dungeon the Qian family had stolen and to establish a timeline. That way they could determine when the traitor had appeared and narrow down the list of suspects. Fan Daoqiang stated that he agreed. According to the investigation, the leak of internal documents occurred about 2 weeks ago. Since then, all of the Qian family's applications have begun to mirror their own. Fan Wan said that in that case, they needed to find out who had joined the Fan family during that period. The head asked his daughter, "Didn't Yin Yutian join us about half a month ago?" The young woman was surprised since this hunter was only F rank and didn't have access to such documents. Besides, lately he'd only been going on raids to underground cities on weekends, and after they ended, he'd simply leave. Fan Wan told her not to defend him. This was a serious problem for the company. Cui Shui pointed out that that wasn't what she meant at all. Fan Daichang said they would handle this according to the rules. No one would rule out Yin Yutian. He also remains a suspect. The old man added that to start with, they needed to gather information on all the new hires who had arrived in the last 2 months, and then check them one by one. Chunui approached his sister and told her not to get upset. Perhaps she knows this guy as a person, but she doesn't know what's hidden in his heart. Cui Shui doesn't know who he really is. They need to wait for the results of the investigation. The girl said that Chunui shouldn't worry. Chunui noted that, according to his information, this guy is constantly surrounded by some girls. His personal life is a complete mess. Cui Shui pointed out that as far as Wei Wei was concerned, she was just a childhood friend of his. Fan Chunui pointed out that she goes to his house, and no one knows what they're doing there. Cui Shui replied that not everyone in this world is like her brother. She knows what he gets up to with his female hunters, so he'd better be careful. Her father could look into this at any moment. Cui Shui turned away, making it clear that the conversation was over. Accompanied by a guard, Cui Shui approached the door behind which Yin Yutian lived. The young woman was hesitant. She didn't know whether she should knock. Cui Shui didn't understand why she was hesitating. After all, she had simply come to inform him of the company's decision not to admit to anything. The uninvited guest's attention was drawn to suspicious sounds coming from behind the door. The girl blushed even more deeply with embarrassment. Behind the door was Yin Yutian. He was the one making those sounds. Wei Wei was there too. The sounds coming from her could also be heard. Cui Shui and the security guard were extremely surprised. The girl thought, could it be that Chunu was right? Cui Shui nervously began pounding on the door and demanding that Yin Yutian open it. The door opened and Wei Wei appeared in the doorway. The girl was surprised by the unexpected visitor and apologized. Wei Wei realized who was standing before her and was even more surprised. The door swung open wider and Yin Yutian appeared in the doorway. He was standing there with his torso bare. The protagonist asked what Shui was doing there. The guest and her bodyguard saw that the guy was naked. Could this really be true? Wei Wei said that even though she didn't know what had brought them here, they could come in. Yin Yutian stopped the girl and told her to take off her shoes first. They had just finished a thorough cleaning. Cui Shui relaxed. It turned out they were just mopping the floors. She'd been thinking something else entirely. Yin Yutian apologized and explained that since it was a bachelor pad, there weren't even any chairs. No matter what the guests brought with them, they'd have to stand while talking. The security guard said that Yin Yutian was behaving extremely rudely. If there were no chairs, he could have offered the young lady a seat on the bed. He really didn't know how to entertain guests. Yin Yutian shouted that they couldn't do that. They had just finished cleaning up. Cui Shui said it didn't matter. They weren't staying long. The girl reported that there was evidence pointing to a traitor within the Fan family. Yin Yutian was among the suspects, so he wouldn't be able to train with them for the time being. Wei Wei was upset. She had asked him many times if he had joined the Fan family, and now they had even come to his home to rule him out. The protagonist replied that he simply didn't want her to worry. Cui Shui told him not to worry. As soon as the suspicions are cleared, he'll be able to return. Yin Yutian replied that he didn't need to. He'd never really wanted to be there in the first place. Cui Shui pointed out that he was already under her authority, and by law couldn't just walk away. Wei Wei said that Yin Yutian didn't belong to her, and she shouldn't get the wrong idea. Cui Shui declared that those were the rules of the training camp. He definitely belonged to her. Wei Wei demanded that they let him go. Miss Fan was forced to leave empty-handed. A security guard tried to calm her down. This guy wasn't going to leave them anyway. Wei Wei declared that Yin Yutian would not return to the Fan family, no matter how much they begged him. Cui Shui replied irritably that Wei Wei didn't understand how training camps worked. The security guard looked around. There wasn't a soul on the street. He said something wasn't right here. Even if there were no passers-by, there should at least be plainclothes police officers. Why was there no one around? The security guard sensed danger and shouted for the young lady to hide behind him. The man immediately changed out of his black suit into his combat uniform and said he would protect her. The next moment, the crush skill was activated, and the security guard collapsed face first onto the asphalt. Cui Shui rushed over to him and asked how he was feeling. A voice from behind told her not to come any closer. They didn't want to crush her. The girl turned around to see who was speaking to her. The stranger sprayed sleep-inducing gas into Cui Shui's face. The girl lost consciousness. The masked man caught her by the arms to keep her from falling. The group leader reported that the mission was complete. Now they needed to carry her to an abandoned underground chamber. The head of the Fan family, as always at this time of day, was at his desk in his office. The man was surprised to see that the monitor screen had gone dark. Could the computer have broken down? The next moment, a masked man appeared on the screen. He greeted Fan Daxiang. The stranger informed Mr. Fan that they had his daughter in their custody. In the background was indeed Cui Shui. She was kneeling with her hands tied behind her back. The villain said that if Chief Fan wanted his daughter back alive and unharmed, he had to prepare 30 billion in unmarked bills. The criminal warned that it would be best if Fan Dekong handed over the money voluntarily. If they even suspected a trick, the deal would fall through. Daxiang flew into a rage and smashed the monitor. Chief Fan called these people criminals. They had signed their own death warrants. How dare they kidnap his daughter? Head Fan wasn't the only one who saw the villain's message. The video recording of the kidnapper's demands was broadcast simultaneously on every screen in the building. News of Fan Cui Shui's kidnapping spread instantly throughout the entire organization. Chief Fan gathered all the hunters of his guild for an emergency meeting. It had been a long time since they had all gathered together. Fan Dekong, accompanied by Fan Chunui, entered the room. The guild leader announced that everyone was already aware of what had happened. Chiu Shui had been kidnapped by unknown assailants. The hunters must do everything in their power to capture the criminals and rescue his daughter. In unison, all the hunters replied that they would carry out the master's orders. Fan Dekong turned to Lan Ziyue. She possesses the magic of thought writing. Could she determine the criminal's location from the video? Lan Ziyue replied that she had already tried, but had been unsuccessful. Fan Dekong was puzzled. What did she mean? Was the video background artificial? Did this place not exist on their planet? The mage noted that this place might not be entirely in their world. Fan Dakyang was alarmed. Could she possibly mean that his daughter was in a dungeon? The chief asked which dungeon exactly and who owned it. Lan Ziyue replied that it was impossible to determine. Fang Chunui said that in that case, they would have to resort to a massive offensive strategy. They needed to send as many people as possible to conduct a thorough search of all unclaimed dungeons. If they didn't find her there, then she must be in a dungeon belonging to one of the 3 remaining families. Fang Dekong agreed that this made sense. It was likely the only way. The chief ordered all hunters to set out immediately on the search and combed through every possible dungeon. In the intensive care unit, security guard Shui Shui was undergoing treatment. Fan Dekong asked how Ben was feeling. Ben apologized to the chief for failing to protect his daughter. The man said he had already deployed all available resources to the search, but the search area was too vast. He wanted to reconstruct the sequence of events. Perhaps some leads would emerge. Ben explained that at that moment, they had just left Yin Yutian's house. He noticed there were no people on the street and told the young lady to stay close to him. Suddenly, he felt intense pressure from above, after which he lost consciousness. Fan Daoqiang ordered a check of all government databases of registered hunters to find everyone with similar abilities. Chunui asked for clarification, so they were attacked immediately after leaving Yin Yutian's house. Ben explained that the lady had wanted to personally inform the young man about the start of the investigation into the traitor case. Fan Chunui said that this young man might be involved. As soon as she told him about the investigation, and immediately after leaving his house, she was abducted. Could this really be a coincidence? Wei Wei was swinging on the children's swings when several young people ran past her. Wei Wei was puzzled. What was going on? Why had they rushed out of the house after the call without even saying where they were going? Some men in black appeared in front of Wei Wei. They apologized and asked if she was Yin Yutian's girlfriend. They said they were looking for him, but he wasn't home. Could she help? Wei Wei replied that she didn't know anything. She sensed that this didn't bode well. The men in black asked Wei Wei to come with them. Fan Kushui, with her hands tied and her mouth taped shut, remained among the kidnappers. One of the villains was angry. When would Fan Dekong arrive? He could no longer feel his feet because of the cold. Another said they needed to be patient. The matter was too serious. Cui Shui realized that her father was the criminal's target. The girl was in a dark cave in one of the abandoned underground passages. The permafrost zone, Sichu Yanyue, accompanied by his companions, was following the route. He Jishin asked why Sichu had summoned them here. Sichu replied that he had invited only Jishin, but Jishin had already brought Yin Yutian along. The protagonist remarked that if he'd known exactly who had summoned him, he would never have come. Yanyue thought that, no matter how things turned out, he had to prove his superiority today. The young men suddenly stopped. Their path was blocked. Standing before the hunters were enormous monsters in the form of polar bears. He Jishin asked what Brother Situ had to say about these monsters, since he'd been here before. Situ Yanyue said they were just small fry. The real trouble would come with the boss. The hunter unleashed a fire attack, and the monsters were destroyed. The criminal guarding the kidnapped girl heard a noise from outside. The villain noticed that someone was outside. But how did that happen? Could it be that they hadn't covered all their tracks? One of them said he would go out of the cave to check what was happening. Outside, everything was ablaze. Situ Yanyue had set it up to deal with the white monsters. He Jishin noted that it was very powerful. Yanyue said that the minions had been wiped out, and the boss fight was next. Yin Yutian asked if all the monsters had been destroyed. Sichu replied that he'd already checked every tree and that there was no point in asking him pointless questions. Jishin pointed out that since Situ had been defeated last time, they should decide on a strategy in advance so they wouldn't lose face again. He wanted to know the boss's abilities. Situ replied that the boss resembled an ice bird. The hunter added that the boss was highly agile in the air. With the flapping of its wings, it stirred up a gale of freezing wind, created intense pressure, could extinguish flames, and form massive ice crystals for attacks. Not even fire could melt them. In battle, it combines the elements of wind and ice. He Jishin looked puzzled. He had always believed that fire always defeats ice, but it turned out that this wasn't always the case. Jishin asked the protagonist if he possessed any wind element skills. Yin Yutian replied that he had a wind sword. He Jishin said that wind usually extinguishes fire, but it can also intensify it. If they joined forces, they could use the wind to intensify the flames, raising their temperature and shattering the ice crystals. Yin Yutian's wind current would also be able to counter the boss's headwind, preventing the fire from dying out. Yin Yutian agreed that this was a good plan. Situ said he was ready to give it a try. The protagonist noted that He Jishin was good at improvising in difficult situations. He replied that all his past combat experience was stored in his mind, and he was always ready to devise tactics. The hunters looked up and saw that the boss was already approaching. It was time to take up battle positions. Yin Yutian readied his sword. Situ Yanyu activated his firepower. Jishin prepared to take command. Jishin noted that this was their first time working together, so they shouldn't go all out right away. They needed to test the waters of their coordination first. Using their planned tactics, the teammates began to explore the best ways to work together. The ice boss was caught off guard. The combined attack yielded its first success. The monster's wing was damaged and its aerodynamics deteriorated significantly. The bird attacked, unleashing a barrage of ice shards. Suyutu ignited a blaze across a vast area to melt the ice. Yin Yutian, swinging his sword, activated a gust of wind, intensifying the flames. The kidnapper, who had escaped from the cave, witnessed a powerful explosion that destroyed the ice monster. The criminal thought the hunters had come only for the boss and would leave soon. The hunters scored a decisive victory. The boss was completely destroyed. Yin Yutian noticed something strange in the forest. Human footprints. Could there really be humanoid monsters here? The kidnapper returned to the cave. His companions asked what was happening outside. Could it be that Fan Duqiang had appeared? The villain said he'd seen some ordinary adventurers, but they'd already left. After all, this was an unclaimed dungeon. Others might show up here as well. The main thing was that no one interfered with their business. Kui Shui realized that it wasn't her father outside. That meant their rescue hadn't begun yet. Situ was surprised by the humanoid monsters Yin Yutian was talking about. After all the monsters in this dungeon have animal-like appearances. Yin Yutian replied that in that case, it seemed strange the tracks behind the tree looked like human footprints. He Jishen examined the footprints and agreed with the assumption. Judging by their size, they belonged to a man. He Jishen activated his observation skill and said that the footprints led in that direction. Yin Yutian suggested they head there and assess the situation. They couldn't rule out the possibility of humanoid monsters. The hunters changed their route and headed in the desired direction. Fan Duqiang, in his office, listened to the guard's report. The men in black had brought Wei Wei to him. Fan Duqiang told the girl that she had to confess where Yin Yutian was, since she was his girlfriend. The girl repeated that she knew nothing. The men in black pounced on Wei Wei, demanding she reveal where they were holding Chief Fan's daughter. Could she really be an accomplice? Fan Duqiang noted that they had specialists capable of accessing other people's memories. If she had anything to say, she'd better confess now. But mind reading was an unpleasant procedure. Wei Wei said that it was illegal and violated her constitutional rights. Fan Duqiang replied that he was the law here. If she wanted to avoid suffering, she should tell the truth. An assistant entered the room and reported that they had discovered something. While reviewing the video footage, the intelligence agents found a lead. The assistant showed an image and explained that a drop of melted snow was visible in the lower right corner. In addition, condensation was visible during the criminal's conversation, which meant it was very cold in there. Foundation ordered an immediate check to determine how many cold underground caverns there were in total. Chunui replied that they had already checked. Among the unclaimed caverns in the permafrost zone, there was only one with the appropriate characteristics. The chief ordered that all search teams be notified immediately. They must head to this underground chamber. Fan Duqiang ordered Chun to follow him immediately. The guard asked what to do with Wei Wei. The boss said they couldn't take their eyes off that girl. They couldn't let her escape. The hunters spotted a cave. Yin Yutian noticed that the tracks led right there. Sichu said that in that case, they should also enter the cave. He Jishin suggested they not rush into it just yet. They needed to discuss everything first. There are obviously people in this cave. If those people see them, they'll think they're trying to steal their prey. That could lead to undesirable consequences. Situ said he didn't care. After all, they had come specifically to find out what those tracks were. Yin Yutian agreed. The hunters continued on their way, entering the cave. Looking around, the protagonist realized it was a stalactite grotto. He hated them with a passion. Why does nature work so sloppily? The kidnappers heard unfamiliar voices in the cave. The villains realized someone was coming for them. Could it be that Fan Duqiang had finally arrived? The invisibility skill was activated. C2 Yanyue shouted loudly to check if anyone was there. There was no response. Suddenly, the hunters heard someone moaning. Could someone be in need of help? Without a word, the young men rushed toward the sounds in unison. The hunters were surprised to see a hostage in the middle of the cave, and it was Fang Sui Shui. The girl's mouth was taped shut, so she couldn't say anything clearly. Yin Yutian asked how she had ended up there. Bandits were hiding behind the protagonist. The villains were preparing a treacherous attack on him. The girl began shaking her head frantically. She wanted to signal to the young man not to approach her. Yin Yutian understood this and stopped. But why was she doing this? The young man sensed that a trap lay ahead. He couldn't take a single step forward. Situ Yanyue shouted for the villains to come out and fight him according to the code of honor. Suddenly, the crush skill was activated. Yin Yutian managed to jump aside at the last moment and was unharmed. The protagonist told his companion that there was something behind him. Situ immediately unleashed a fire attack. A powerful fire explosion rang out behind Yin Yutian. The villain continued to use the hide skill. He said that this guy was quite quick on his feet, but there was no point in hiding anymore. The villain deactivated the skill and became visible again. The kidnapper, dagger in hand, appeared behind our hero. However, a flash of fire erupted between them once more. Situ reacted in a flash. Jishin was surprised. Could this really be an invisible assassin? It seemed they'd gotten themselves into something serious. Situ told the guy to calm down and help him. The villain attacked the protagonist, but our hero dodged the blows effectively. Situ came to the rescue and kicked the villain in the torso, sending him flying to the side. The hunter continued his attack and unleashed a stream of fire at the villain. A powerful flash erupted. The kidnapper emerged from the fire unscathed. After that, he lunged at Yin Yutian once more. The young man, sword in hand, put up a worthy fight. Situ Yanyue used his fire skill once more. Flames engulfed the criminal. Yin Yutian dodged and avoided the fire's impact on his body. Situ Yanyue rushed at his opponent and warned him not to even think about running away. Yin Yutian grabbed his companion by the shoulder and kept him from falling into the trap. The villain, standing at a safe distance, clapped his hands and remarked that Yin Yutian was very agile, having managed to evade several turbulences. Situ Yanyue had also performed quite well. Situ wondered how this scoundrel knew his full name. All three kidnappers appeared before the hunters. The villain noticed that everyone present knew the young master from the Situ clan. Yin Yutian was surprised. Could there really be another family of dungeon owners? The villains realized that the whole situation had turned out to be quite amusing. They had kidnapped the heiress of the Fang clan, and the heir of the Situ clan had come to them of his own accord. It seemed they had caught two big fish with one net. Situ laughed. Did they really think they'd caught him? At that moment, Clan Fan's leader and his adopted son were entering the abandoned dungeon. Hunters from the Fan clan were running after the clan leader. The hunters said they had rushed here immediately after receiving the relevant information. The rest would catch up with them soon. Fan Dekong said he had no time to wait. They had to move out. Fan Chunu held a sealing crystal in his hand. Fan Dekong, followed by Fan Chunui, found themselves in an abandoned cold dungeon. The hunters were unable to follow the leader into the dungeon. To their surprise, the passageway was sealed off. The hunters realized it was a trap. Fan Dekong was surprised when he saw human footprints. The leader decided to check whose footprints they were. Fan Dekong looked back and asked where the rest of the hunters were. Chunui replied that he didn't know himself, but was willing to check. The leader said that in that case, the two of them would follow the tracks together. As expected, Fan Dekong arrived at the cave. The tracks led inside. The chief told Chunui that they would go into the dungeon together and that they needed to hurry. Chunui warned that they needed to act prudently. They couldn't scare off the villains prematurely. They had to take advantage of the element of surprise. Fan Dekong said that Chunu didn't understand something. His goal wasn't to save his daughter, but to destroy the kidnappers. Chunui was surprised. Could it be that the old man wasn't worried about Chui Shui's safety? Fan Dekong broke into a run. The young man was forced to chase after the old man. Yin Yutian continued to fend off the criminals' attacks, wielding his sword with expert skill. Situ Yanyue switched to hand-to-hand combat and also put up a fight, all the while not forgetting to unleash his fire attacks. He Jishin, peering out from his hiding spot, thought that things weren't going well. It was time to get out of there. Yin Yutian and Situ Yanyue heard some strange noises coming from the side. The villains realized that Fan Do Chiang had appeared in the cave. One of them said it was time to leave. The criminals activated their unique abilities, using the stealth skill. At that moment, Fan Daqiang swept aside the obstacles in his path, broke inside, and found himself on the battlefield. Chief Fan saw the armed young men and his bound daughter sitting on the ground. Yin Yutian and Situ Yanyue hadn't expected such an encounter to take place here. Fan Daqiang flew into a rage. Could Yin Yutian really be involved in this? Fan Chunui shouted loudly. So it was Yin Yutian who kidnapped Cui Shui. The protagonist said that was an absolute lie. There were insinuations here. Chunui told his sister not to be afraid. They would rescue her right away. The girl shook her head, signaling that they shouldn't come near her. Situ tried to explain, saying it was all a misunderstanding. It wasn't what Chief Fan thought. They'd ended up here by accident. They were just passing by. Cui Shui had been kidnapped by a completely different group of people. Fan Dekang wouldn't listen to a word of it. He exclaimed indignantly, "Could the Situ family really be capable of such a thing?" The man shouted that he didn't want to listen to any more empty talk. The kidnappers must be eliminated. Chief Fan had strengthened his body to S level. The enraged father lunged at the two young hunters with his fists. Yin Yu Tian and Situ Yanyue managed to leap in different directions and dodge Fan Dekang's fury. The hunters turned to face their opponent, realizing a fight was imminent. Situ shouted for Yin Yu Tian to step aside. He tried to defend himself against Fan Dekang using a fire skill. With a punch, Chief Fan shattered the hunter's fire attack. Yin Yu Tian told the chief that he was not at fault and called for peace talks. However, Fan Daqiang wouldn't listen to a word of it. He struck the young man, and the boy, coughing up blood, was sent flying to the side. Seeing the old man's aggression, Siutu Yanyue realized that a calm conversation was out of the question at that moment. Without pausing for a second, Fan Daqiang lunged at the young hunter once more. Situ shouted that he urgently needed the vortex sword. Yin Yu Tian reacted just in time. The protective gloves were deployed. Immunity to physical attacks was activated. The hunters launched a combo attack to stop Foundation's charge. They needed to buy some time. The outline of a man appeared through the fiery flames. Nothing could stop him. Siutu apologized to Chief Fan. After all, if they hadn't counterattacked, they would have been in danger. The leader leaped out of the fire and knocked the hunters to the ground. Foundation grabbed Yin Yudian by the throat and began to choke him. Blood gushed from the young man's mouth. The man swung his arm, intending to land a punch. However, in the next moment, blood gushed from his mouth. Tui Shui saw this and realized that her father was having another attack. Fan Chunui thought that everything was going his way. Fan Dekang let go of the hunter, clutched his chest, and began to breathe heavily. Yin Yu Tian was frightened. Could it be that they had inflicted such severe damage on the leader? Fan Daqiang turned around and asked why Chunui was standing there doing nothing. Fan Chunui replied to the leader that he was already on his way. Chunui approached the old man from behind. His eyes glinted with malice. The traitor activated his unique skill and pierced the leader's body with beams of fire. Yin Yutian and Siyu Yanyue cried out in surprise, but Fan Dekang had already collapsed to the ground. The leader asked in surprise, could it be that Chunui is in cahoots with Yin Yutian and his cronies? Chunui smiled and said, "Don't make me laugh. How could I possibly be on their side?" Chunui directed his beams at the hunters and said he would finish them off soon as well. With his last ounce of strength, Fan Dekang leaped to his feet, clenched his fist, and lunged at Fan Chuna. The leader deflected the fiery attack, redirecting it toward Fan Chuna. Chunui was frightened and tried to shield himself with his hands from his adoptive father's wrath. At that moment, the crush skill was activated. Foundation was stopped in his tracks but managed to stay on his feet. Chunui exhaled in relief and said they had scared him. The traitor stood surrounded by the criminals who had kidnapped his sister. He said that Headfan was the first person to manage to stay on his feet after the crush skill was activated. Fan Dekang was surprised to see Chunui standing alongside members of the Qian family. The crush skill was activated again. Fan Dekang stumbled and fell to his knees. He asked why Chunu had betrayed him. Chunui approached clan leader Fan, smirked, and said that he was about to destroy him. Kui Shui was frightened and closed her eyes. At that moment, a stream of fire appeared, separating Chief Fan and Chunu. The criminals lost sight of Chief Fan. When the fire disappeared, Situ and Yin Yu Tian appeared. The hunters were ready for a confrontation. The kidnappers said they would take care of these young hunters themselves. Chunui, meanwhile, would deal with Chief Fan Dekang. The young men acted skillfully and decisively. The villains were powerless against them. Chunui once again turned toward the wounded leader, Fan Dekang. The traitor aimed beams of fire at the old man and said that he would now surely be destroyed. At that moment, He Jushin activated the aggressive shadow skill. The young man said they shouldn't forget about him. The villains were terrified. What was happening to them? Why wouldn't their bodies obey them? Chunai's fire beams were deflected and sent in a different direction. The kidnappers found themselves within the range of those fire beams. A powerful explosion rang out and He Jushin was thrown aside by the shockwave. The hunters said that Jishin did a great job. His skill had come in handy. After the explosion, Jishin got back on his feet and said it would take a few days before he could use that move again. Chunui was indignant. Where on earth did this guy come from? No one had even noticed him. Yin Yu Tian said that these kidnappers would no longer be getting in their way, and now they could deal with the main culprit. Situ Yanyue directed a stream of fire at the traitor. Fan Chunui said that it was too early for these two to get carried away with excitement. In response, he fired beams of fire at the hunters. The fire beams were highly energetic, so the hunters were thrown in different directions. Yin Yu Tian managed to stay on his feet despite the intense pressure. The shock caused a stalactite to break loose and begin falling. At that moment, Kui Shui was standing directly beneath it. Fan Dakian saw that his daughter was in danger and rushed to her aid. Chi Fang shielded his daughter from danger with his broad back. The stalactite fell nearby and no one was hurt. The girl looked up and saw her father standing beside her. Fan Dacian apologized and said that his body was too weak for the S level. After saying this, the man lost his balance and collapsed to the ground. Blood continued to ooze from his mouth. Kui Shui ran over to her father and began to support him. He Jishin was also nearby. Cui Shui asked her adoptive brother, "What did my family do to offend you?" The girl asked why Fan Chinui was acting this way. Fan Chinui said that the public would only know that the head of the Fan family and his daughter had been attacked by some bandits. In the end, it turned out that they had all destroyed one another. No suspicion would fall on him. Chunui added that he had arrived too late, so all that would be left for him was to inherit everything that belonged to the Fan family, with tears in his eyes. The traitor attacked his rivals again. Cui Shui was frightened, as the attack was directed at her as well. However, He Jishin reacted in time and activated his aggressive shadow skill once more. The hunter managed to deflect the attack, and the girl was unharmed. C2 was outraged. Did this scoundrel really dare to lay a hand on him? With a deft strike, he deflected the traitor's firebeam. Chunui dodged and asked, "Does this brat seriously expect to hit him with such slow projectiles?" Fan Chunui added that even if these two managed to dodge his attacks, the cave wouldn't hold out for long anyway. The traitor said he would blow up the cave, and everyone would remain buried here forever. C2 Yanyue said that Chunui had completely lost his mind. Did he really want to die here along with everyone else? The villain said he had already summoned the Chien family. They would be here soon with reinforcements. Even if he took a few hits, he would become the hero who fought the kidnappers. Yin Yu Tian said he had absolutely no desire to die in this cave and asked his partner if he had any ideas. He Zhushen remarked that if they managed to launch a powerful attack, it would cause the cave to collapse. The hunter added that even if they were lucky enough to escape, Cui Shui and her father wouldn't have that chance. They would be left behind. If they all managed to escape, Fan Chunui would become the new head of the Fan family, and they would be branded as kidnappers. Yin Yu Tian and Situ Yanyue decided that in that case they would have to eliminate this traitor. Jishen remarked that this plan didn't sound very well thought out. Chunui asked, "What are these three whispering about?" Yin Yu Tian lunged at the traitor. Chunui said that this hapless hunter wouldn't even be able to get close to him. He Jishen activated the aggressive shadow skill. The distance between the opponents continued to shrink. The protagonist used the perfect right hook and landed a blow. Fan Chunui managed to dodge. He said that although close combat wasn't his strongest suit, this kid still wouldn't be able to defeat him in hand-to-hand combat. Yin Yutian grabbed his opponent by the arms. Chunui was surprised. What was he planning to do? Yin Yutian, holding the traitor in place, shouted to his partner that he was ready. Situ activated the divine flame and attacked. Chunui realized their plan and decided he couldn't stay pinned down. The villain braced his foot and tried to push the protagonist away. Yin Yutian said that now Chunu wouldn't be able to escape him. The traitor called the hunter a madman, since they might both die together. The divine flame skill was activated. The opponents were engulfed in flames and a powerful explosion rang out. When the smoke cleared, Fan Chunua was still standing. The traitor laughed and said that the hunter had been wrong to expect that they would both die together. Yin Yu Tian activated the decoy doll skill and grabbed his opponent from behind. Chunui was surprised. How was that possible? Yin Yu Tian said that fire attacks wouldn't bring the cave crashing down. The only question was, how many such attacks could Chunui withstand? The protagonist added that today he was ready to completely nullify the possibility of using the decoy doll technique. Therefore, they would continue. Situ Yanyue continued his fire attacks. Fan Chunui fell to the ground and thought that if these two continued to hit him with such precision, his strength wouldn't last much longer. The traitor shouted that in that case, they wouldn't survive either. Chunui launched his lightning-fast attacks. Yin Yu Tian appeared behind the traitor. However, Chunui noticed this too late. The protagonist struck. The villain lost his footing and was sent flying far to the side. Far away, amidst the snow-capped mountains, a powerful beam of fire shot straight up into the sky. The kidnappers, watching from a distance, concluded that the cave had been blown up. Now, according to Chunui's plan, they needed to return and retrieve him. In that case, they had to remove the seal so that other hunters would come and see how Fan Chinui had heroically tried to save the daughter of the Fan family head, risking his own life. The path was clear, and the hunters, along with security personnel, were able to enter the abandoned underground chamber. They could now also witness the powerful explosions that were supposed to have accompanied the cave's demolition. The traders said they should head in the direction where smoke and dust were visible. When the smoke cleared, Fan Chinui managed to crawl out from under the rubble. He looked around, saw no one, and concluded that the head of the Fan family and his daughter had been killed by the kidnappers, and he had eliminated those villains. The trader rejoiced and said that now all that was left for him to do was to weep with tears in his eyes. Then he would inherit everything that belonged to the Fan family. It's a very beautiful and sad story. However, Yin Yu Tian managed to crawl out from under the rubble. He said that the trader would first have to deal with him. The decoy doll skill had been activated beforehand. The protagonist was still alive. Sichu Yanyue was also unharmed aside from some bruises and scrapes. Sichu was surprised. Yin Yu Tian had shielded him with his own body, yet somehow managed to remain standing. Fan Chinui realized his plan had failed and began to seethe with rage once more. The trader attacked our hero once more. It was a desperate attack. Yin Yu Tian dodged the attack and closed in on his opponent. For a moment, Chinui was disoriented. Taking advantage of the situation, the protagonist found himself behind the villain. Chinui immediately jumped to the side, spun around, and began landing precise strikes on Yin Yu Tian. However, these strikes missed their mark. Our hero began moving quickly in a circle, dodging the attacks. Chinui continued to expend his energy and resources. Fan Chinui was baffled. What kind of skill was this? In just a few moments, this guy had become significantly faster. The trader saw that Fan Dekong and his daughter were also still alive. The villain once again used his unique abilities to deal with his opponents. Yin Yu Tian saw this and realized that the Fan family was in danger. Our hero sprinted forward and threw himself in the way to protect the head of the family and his daughter. There was a massive explosion. Thick smoke engulfed everything around them. Stone shards flew in all directions. Fan Chinui began to gloat. Could it be that this kid had decided to act as a human shield? When the smoke cleared, the trader saw that Yin Yu Tian was alive and well, standing firmly on his feet. Cui Shui, with tears in her eyes, asked how Yin Yu Tian was feeling. The young man's hands were bleeding, but he was full of energy. Another powerful explosion rang out. Once again, the smoke obscured everything. When the smoke cleared, Cui Shui and He Jishen were met with a horrifying sight. A massive hole gaped open. The hole was in the protagonist's body. His hands had also been seriously injured. Fan Chinui saw that his attack had hit its mark this time and laughed loudly. However, our hero's body had healed as the dummy skill had been activated once again. The villain grew furious. Could this boy really have a regeneration skill? But how quickly would he be able to recover this time? The protagonist was attacked once more. Cui Shui thought that Yin Yu Tian was protecting her at the cost of his own life. The girl rushed to intercept the attacking skills, trying to protect the young man. Cui Shui shielded the young man with her body and activated her unique abilities. The villain's attack was repelled and redirected in the opposite direction. Fan Daqiang saw this and immediately recalled that Cui Shui's mother had, in exchange for her own life, bestowed protective armor upon her daughter so that the girl would not perish from external forces. He had no idea the armor was so durable. The leader said that Yin Yu Tian didn't need to protect his daughter. The armor was safeguarding her. They needed to focus their efforts on subduing Chinui. Thanks to the decoy, our hero's body had already recovered. The trader was once again disheartened. Chapter fans said that the destructive power of Chunyu's light cores is immense, but his body is only approaching A rank. Therefore, the explosions of his own orbs can inflict significant damage on him. He won't use them near himself, which means he needs to get closer. Following his master's advice, the protagonist rushed to attack the villain. Chinui thrust his arm forward and intercepted his opponent's fist. The villain laughed. Did this kid really believe that his body wasn't quite up to a rank? In reality, his body was S rank. Yin Yu Tian ignored these explanations and landed a punch to his opponent's jaw. Chinui hadn't expected this and, losing his balance, was forced to fly far backward. The trader fell to his knees and thought that the power of this boy's fist was simply unfathomable. It even surpassed S rank. Our hero approached his opponent. However, someone from the sidelines shouted for him to stop. The security guards who had appeared shouted that they had to protect Mr. Fan Chinui. Kui Shui said they had all misunderstood. The girl explained that a traitor had hired the kidnappers to take care of her and her father. Yin Yu Tian was saving them all. A kidnapper appeared next to Chun Yu. The traitor said he hadn't lost. He still had a way out. The villains supporting Chun Yu said that this guy had already been beaten to a pulp, yet he still wouldn't shut up. Yin Yu Tian tried to stop them, but they vanished without a trace. An item he'd obtained during his battle with the turtle appeared in the protagonist's hands. It should help him recover, otherwise the side effects of using the substitute doll would knock him out. Lan Ziyu apologized for arriving so late and asked if Cui Shui was all right. The girl turned around and said she was fine. Yin Yu Tian said he was feeling fine too. Lan Ziyu got angry. What had he done to upset her so much? Why did this guy have such an influence on Cui Shui? The guards said they were ready. Ziyu needed to activate the portal to teleport. Everyone got ready to leave the dungeon. Fan Daqiang was in the intensive care unit with an oxygen mask on his face. Cui Shui asked what the doctor and the mage had to say about her father's condition. The magician noted that if they wanted to save the chief, they could use a forbidden method passed down from his ancestors. The doctor said that Fan Daqiang was in very critical condition. The doctor urged the woman not to trust this charlatan of a magician. The sorcerer shouted that if the doctor knew nothing about magic, he shouldn't desecrate his ancestors' methods. Opinions were divided. He Zhishen said they had nothing to do with the kidnapping and asked if they could be released. Lan Ziyu said that Headfan himself would have to decide what to do with these young people once he woke up. Situ Yanya declared that this was a mockery. Yin Yutian saw Wei Wei and asked how she had ended up there. The girl replied that she had been detained. At first, they thought Yin Yutian was the kidnapper, which is why they detained her. The protagonist was outraged. It was all because of that scoundrel Fan Chunya. Suddenly, a straight line appeared on the monitor screen instead of a sine wave. Chairman Fan's condition had taken a sharp turn for the worse. Cui Shui screamed at her father not to scare her. Wei Wei said she could try to stabilize his condition and bring the old man back to consciousness. Yin Yutian thought that they hadn't managed to hide Wei Wei's unique powers from everyone after all. Wei Wei activated her abilities and began treating Chief Fan Dekong. The patient's pulse returned. The chief opened one eye slightly and assessed the situation. Cui Shui asked how her father was feeling. Situ thought that this girl possessed a powerful healing ability. The chief told Lan Ziyue to gather everyone tomorrow. An important announcement needed to be made. The mage said she understood everything and asked what she should do with these people. Fan Dekong thanked the protagonist and his friends, calling them benefactors. The chief added that everyone should leave the chamber. His daughter and the young hunter were to remain, as he had something to announce. The next day in the Great Hall, Chief Fan Daqiang addressed those present. He announced that Chunui had conspired with the enemies. For this, he was expelled from the Fan family. Those present were surprised, though many had disliked the traitor even before this. The girl recalled how she had asked Chunuo if he really liked Cui Shui. At the time, he replied that Fan Dekong wanted the position of family head to pass to his daughter in the future, and that in order to secure a high-ranking position, he had to win his half-sister's trust. Chunui had said then that she was the only one he truly loved. The girl was angry. She believed that the couple had set her up with Chunuya. The CEO added that due to his health, he could no longer continue to run the company. Therefore, taking this opportunity, he is officially handing over the position of CEO to his daughter, Cui Shui. Those present agreed that she would handle the role perfectly, and many supported this decision. Fan Dekong added that his daughter had decided to appoint Yin Yutian as her first deputy. Sister Hu, an A-rank hunter, asked, "Isn't that guy an F-rank? On what grounds will he become her deputy?" Sister Hu added that she was against it. He Zhishen said that Yin Yutian is an exceptionally talented young man. How could anyone speak out against him? Sister Hu, backed by her followers, reiterated that Yin Yutian was merely an F-rank. He didn't deserve to be ahead of the others and become the first deputy. Hu added that Head Fan had always evaluated people based on merit and talent, yet his daughter was choosing a deputy based on personal preferences. Cui Shui asked, "Do all of you here really want to be judged solely on your talents and merits?" A fan of Sister Hu stepped onto the stage. He kicked his leg in the air and said that was exactly what he wanted. Cui Shui was seriously alarmed when she saw this hunter. Sister Hu thought, although Little Liang is only B rank when he puts on his special high rank sneakers, the power of his spinning kick is comparable to that of an S rank. Little Liang continued to swing his leg around on stage for a while longer, demonstrating his abilities. The protagonist activated his ultra-fast fist-fighting technique. Little Liang didn't even realize how he'd been attacked. Yin Yutian wondered, why would such a weakling wear such huge sneakers? Does he even realize how ridiculous it looks? Under the force of the massive attack, Liang was knocked back and slammed his back against the wall. Those present didn't even realize what had happened. What rank could that guy possibly be if he was able to pull that off against a B-rank fighter? No one else came forward to protest. Silence fell over the hall. Cui Shui thought back to when they were in the dungeon. Yin Yutian had used the same move against Chunui. The girl asked those present if anyone else wanted to challenge him. Sister Hu looked at little Lian's motionless body. The girl said that he would have to answer for the harm he had caused her ward. Yin Yutian was surprised. Could this weakling really be her student? Sister Hu said that this guy had rejoiced too soon. Moments of happiness are fleeting, just like his life. His comrade told Sister Hu to hold off. It was hard to gauge this guy's strength, so she shouldn't let her emotions get the better of her. They needed to choose a better time. Sister Hu agreed and added that this guy could live a little longer for now. Yin Yutian advised Lian's disciple to change his shoes so as not to embarrass himself. The hunter apologized to those present for the commotion. With a subtle flick of his tongue, the man released a barely noticeable drone from his mouth. After that, the meeting ended. There were no further objections. Yin Yutian wondered what was wrong with that guy and why he was wearing such oversized sneakers. He still couldn't get that image out of his head. The doors swung open, and Jishin and Cui Shui entered the room. The protagonist asked what had happened. Cui Shui said that Yin Yutian had really helped her out today. The guy replied that it was no big deal. After all, they'd already agreed on everything, so he had no choice but to do it. The girl thanked him again. Our hero asked Jishin why he was still following him around. Jishin asked if Yin Yutian had any free time. They could put together a team and explore some abandoned dungeons. Cui Shui was surprised. What was he talking about? She had just been about to bring that very topic up. Jishin remarked that great minds think alike. Yin Yutian said he wanted to hear an explanation. Cui Shui said that in that case she would start from the very beginning. Worldwide, dungeon resources are very limited and are mostly controlled by government agencies. Yin Yutian pointed out that the Fang Corporation is a non-governmental organization. The girl confirmed this and added that such a status has its pros and cons. Non-governmental organizations like the Fan Clan can obtain dungeon resources, but their distribution is entirely regulated by the state. It takes place at specific times and in specific quantities. When after some time, the resources of one dungeon are exhausted, they have to move on to the next one. In nature, this is called the law of conservation of resources. This is precisely why many non-governmental organizations essentially fall into decline. Cui Shui noted that they needed to explore new, unclaimed dungeons. Dungeons that have not yet been discovered by anyone hold vast deposits of all kinds of resources. Yin Yutian admitted that he wasn't interested in that. Jishin began pleading with the young man to go at least once. After all, he had spent so long collecting maps drawn up by other dungeon explorers. Yin Yutian looked at one of the maps and asked why the route on it was so chaotic. Jishin suggested that there must have been some reason for it. Yin Yutian said it must be some kind of joke since there was no logic to it. Jishin suggested in that case that they map out their own route, which would be much better than the previous one. Cui Shui supported this suggestion. Yin Yutian agreed and added that they would start with this map. The protagonist said he wanted to reach the western dungeons via the most direct route possible and explore them thoroughly. Cui Shui was satisfied with this decision. At that moment, a spy drone was flying near the girl, meticulously gathering information. Sister Hu's assistant reported that the information had been successfully intercepted and processed. Yin Yutian was planning to scout the unclaimed dungeons in the west. Sister Hu replied that this was just perfect. Brother Dao knew this area very well. Sister Hu said they were counting on Brother Dao and that Yin Yutian needed to be dealt with. S-rank hunter Brother Dao said that this kid would pay dearly for everything. Sitting at the computer, Cui Shui was carefully reviewing the case files. Her father walked into the office and asked how his daughter was doing and whether she was managing well in her new position. The young woman invited her father over and told him to take a look at this. The screen displayed information about Fan Chunyu's contacts. He had been in touch with the Qian family on almost every matter, including the infiltration of hunters into the Fan family as internal spies. Fan Dekong studied the information and cursed his adopted son viciously. Suddenly, the old man slapped the girl on the back of the head. Cui Shui was taken aback. What was going on with her father? Fan Doqiang held up a crushed drone in his hand and said that his daughter had been wearing a listening device. If it weren't for his S-rank vision, they would hardly have discovered it. The girl said that this meant someone knew about Yin Yutian's plans to visit the dungeons in the west. During a video call with his henchman, Fan Chunui said that in that case they should follow Yin Yutian. Yin Yutian hadn't met Brother Dao yet, so he would be sent in as an undercover agent. He would need to gain the young hunter's trust. Chunui added that Sister Hu and her assistants would lie in wait. Chunui added that once Yin Yutian had been weakened during the dungeon clear, Brother Dao would launch a surprise attack. Sister Hu would also join in. Together, they would be more than a match for this guy. This time, Yin Yutian would pay for everything, with interest. The traitor added that Sister Hu would have a 2-to-1 numerical advantage. She shouldn't lose. Yin Yutian and He Jishin, following the designated route, reached a tower located in a deserted area. Jishin checked the topographic map and said this was the first checkpoint on their route. He Jishin said he had never been to the dungeons in this area before. It would be safer to go there with a larger group. The protagonist was surprised. Had Jishin only just thought of this? His companion pointed out that it wasn't a big deal. They'd find companions once they got there. These dungeons were constantly being cleared out by freelance hunters. The young men reached the tower. Yin Yutian looked up and saw a man at the top. The stranger jumped straight down from the tower. The man asked if they were planning to explore the local dungeons and if they'd like to join him. Jishin asked him if he was one of the local freelance hunters. Yin Yutian said he was against it. He wasn't interested in the offer. The stranger said he'd been working in these parts for a long time and knew the area well. Were these people sure they didn't need him? Yin Yutian noticed that the guy was covered in dirt. When he jumped down, he sent a cloud of dust flying. He'd only just shown up, and he was already causing so many problems. Sister Hu, peeking out from behind cover, couldn't understand why they were taking so long over there. The local hunter replied that he usually behaved much more carefully. Lately, he'd barely left the dungeons, so his clothes were a little worn. He Jishin suggested going with this guy. He knows the area well. The stranger said he really did know the area well. Brother Dao was furious. He decided he would definitely tear this guy to pieces when the opportunity arose. Yin Yutian said he agreed and asked what the guy's name was. The stranger replied that for many years, everyone he knew had called him Brother Dao. After that, the young men entered the abandoned dungeon through the portal. Outside, Sister Hu ordered her assistants to keep a close watch on the exit. As soon as they appeared, they were to attack them immediately. He Jishin noted that it was a desolate dungeon. Nothing could be seen here except sand. After a while, armed warriors appeared before the hunters. Brother Dao drew his sword and said he would take care of these little ones himself. Dao indeed charged into battle and struck at the monsters. The monsters were destroyed as if they were clay warriors. Jishin said that was really cool. Brother Dao's attack was at least a rank. Dao said he had only just begun to warm up. 3 strange and suspicious objects appeared where the 3 destroyed warriors had been. Yin Yutian said they shouldn't let their guard down. The real challenges were still ahead. Suddenly, new warriors appeared where those objects had been. Yin Yutian was surprised by what was happening. Dao explained that he'd encountered this before. Unless the key node was disabled, these soldiers would keep appearing indefinitely. The key mechanism of the sandy dungeon, the Vessel of Nightmares, was located on a tree. Dao realized that the withered tree beneath the mechanism was a hidden boss. As soon as he swung at the Vessel of Nightmares, there might be a chance to defeat it. Yin Yutian asked again, "Are you really saying these warriors will keep respawning?" The answer was yes. He Jishin surmised that they were stuck here for the long haul. Yin Yutian drew his sword and charged at the warriors who had appeared. Dao was surprised. Wouldn't it be better to destroy the Vessel of Nightmares first? Jishin remarked that his companion wouldn't destroy something that allowed him to gain endless bonuses. Yin Yutian continued to swing his sword, dispatching the approaching monsters. After that, new items kept appearing. The bandits in ambush didn't understand why the hunters still hadn't returned. Maybe they'd left through another exit? Sister Hu told them to stop whining. It would be better if someone brought her some iced black tea. An assistant went off to look for some, but had no idea where to find iced black tea in the middle of the desert at night. Yin Yutian, his strength waning, continued to fight the warriors who kept reappearing. In the spot where a warrior had been destroyed, several objects would appear from which more warriors would emerge. Dao wondered how long he planned to keep this up and why he didn't seem to get tired at all. He Jishin surmised that his friend wouldn't stop until he'd collected all the bonuses. Dao was furious. Was this some kind of joke? The villain thought, if this keeps up, he won't have a chance to finish him off. Dao drew his sword from its sheath and said it was time to take matters into his own hands. He rushed toward the tree and decided to finish the quest first, then deal with his hunter on his way out. The villain tried to attack the Vessel of Nightmares, realizing that a hidden boss was about to appear. The tree did indeed become aggressive and wouldn't let Dao near the Vessel of Nightmares. Jishin shouted to be careful. A branch of the tree turned into a fist and attacked Dao. The hunter was sent flying far backward but managed to stay on his feet. Yin Yutian was surprised. Could there really be another hidden boss here? Dao replied that he didn't know himself. The villain was being evasive, for it was precisely with this boss in mind that he had devised his plans. Yin Yutian approached the hidden boss. His attention was now focused entirely on it. The last time our hero used combined attacks with Sidhu, a thought occurred to him. To be prepared for anything in the dungeon, you need to carry items of various elements. The protagonist activated super speed mode. Dao shouted for the guy not to charge headlong at the boss. However, our hero was impossible to stop. Dao hoped that in trying to stop this guy, he hadn't given away the fact that he already knew what made this boss special. Yin Yutian approached the boss and began hacking at the branches and roots within reach with his sword. Our hero pulled a lighter out of his pocket, lit it, and swung. The lighter flew straight into the hidden boss's gaping maw. It was a direct hit. The hidden boss monster began to swell and grow in size. Processes incompatible with normal existence began to take place inside its body. The next moment, a powerful explosion occurred. Under the impact of the shockwave, the hunters were thrown in all directions. Yin Yutian was unharmed, as his decoy doll skill had been activated. However, the young man admitted that it had been quite dangerous. After the smoke cleared, Yin Yutian saw that the boss had become even stronger. Dao was also injured during the explosion. He sprained his ankle. Dao thanked Yin Yutian for saving him. Deep down, he couldn't understand how it had come to this, that his enemy was the one saving him. Yin Yutian replied that there was no need for thanks, since they were, after all, on the same team. Dao decided that he would help defeat the tree after all, and return the favor. This shouldn't be considered a betrayal of Fan Chunui. The tree went on the rampage again, and became increasingly aggressive. The entire team needed to work together seamlessly. Jishin noticed that this boss had modes for both melee and ranged attacks. Dao pointed out that the boss's defense was quite weak in close combat. The hunter added that they just needed to choose the right moment and finish off this boss. Dao added that if the attack failed, they wouldn't have time to dodge the explosion. Yin Yutian needed to understand this. The protagonist said that in that case, they'd have to give it their all. The monster opened its mouth and unleashed another burst of explosive energy. Under the force of the shockwave, the hunters were once again blown far backward. After yet another failed attack, Dao said he would target the outer branches to distract the monster and trigger another explosive attack. Jishin said he would help as well. Yin Yutian would have to take care of the rest. Jishin activated the aggressive shadow skill. Dao thrust his sword forward and charged at the monster's branches and roots. The monster continued to act aggressively, with explosions ringing out periodically all around them. Yin Yutian activated his super speed and charged at the tree trunk. Our hero leaped to the very top and plunged his sword halfway into the tree trunk. After that, he ran along the entire length of the trunk, slicing through the monster's body. When Yin Yutian jumped off the monster, its body had been completely sliced to pieces. The hunters retreated to a safe distance and watched the aftermath. This time, a powerful explosion occurred, after which the monster's regeneration was impossible. When the smoke cleared, they were able to look around. The tree trunk had been destroyed, leaving only charred stumps in its place. A sphere that discharged energy appeared overhead. It created a zone of weightlessness with a diameter of 100 meters. All moving objects within this space enter a state of slow motion and weightlessness. Dao said that this boss was taken care of, so they could move on. The villain thought he'd paid his debt to this guy. Now he could finish him off. But were his comrades waiting for him outside? Yin Yutian said that they really should move on. Jishin wondered where they should go. The protagonist replied that they should head to the next dungeon. He wants to clear out all the dungeons in the west. In the next dungeon, the boss was a dragon. The dragon was defeated, and the dungeon was cleared. After entering yet another dungeon, they encountered the boss, an ancient warrior. The boss was defeated, and the dungeon was cleared. The hunters pressed on. Dao carried the artifacts they had earned. The newcomer to the group said that Yin Yutian was a real butcher. Jishin also admitted that his friend took dungeon clearing very seriously, and he hadn't thought they'd be able to get this far by following this route. Jishin noted, judging by the map, the next dungeon is the westernmost one in this area. Beyond that lies the border. Yin Yutian said that in that case, they would clear out this dungeon and head back. The young people found themselves in a city of hunters. Yin Yutian noticed a woman speaking to her comrades in the town square. The woman looked up, and fear flashed in her eyes. Before her eyes appeared the gaping maw of a bloodthirsty monster. A huge winged monster was descending, intending to abduct a person. As a result, the woman was abducted, and the monster began to carry her away. Yin Yutian, along with his friends who were among the crowd, asked in surprise what that was. He Jishen remarked that the scene looked like an in-game video. How could something like that appear in the dungeon? The local citizens saw the hunters and asked if the foreign warriors would be willing to slay the evil dragon and rescue their princess. The enormous dragon opened its jaws and roared loudly. Along with the roar, flames burst from the dragon's mouth, shooting straight up into the sky. The dragon began circling above the fortress, at the foot of which Yin Yutian had appeared. The protagonist managed to leap onto the monster's body and began moving across it, striving to get closer to its head. The dragon writhed, but the man remained on its body. Yin Yutian, swinging his sword, prepared to strike. The young man leaped high into the air and swung his sword. At that moment, the dragon opened its jaws and roared. A local resident said he had seen with his own eyes how the brave hero had slain the evil dragon with his sword. He believes the hunters will be able to rescue the princess. Shishin noticed that this man was talking like a non-player character from a video game. This must be a story-driven dungeon. Yin Yutian asked what was going on. Dao looked as if he'd seen a ghost. Dao turned to the local resident and called him his son. Yin Yutian and He Jishen were frankly surprised. Dao said that many years ago his son had set out to explore the western dungeons. He had been missing ever since. All these years he had been scouring the dungeons in search of his son. The local resident told the hunter that he didn't know him. Dao was surprised. How can that be? He's his father after all. Yin Yutian told Dao to stop crying and wipe away his tears. It looked disgusting. The old man held out the bag and told the hunter to wipe himself off with it. Dao asked what it was. Could it really be cookies? The old man replied that it wasn't a cookie, but a compressed flying carpet, a condensed version of it. The local showed how it worked and threw the package into the water. The package got wet, began to expand, and turned into a carpet. Yin Yutian was surprised. Where did such a strange phenomenon come from in the dungeon? Dao turned his attention back to the local resident and called him his son. Jishin said that Dao must have gotten something mixed up. How could a non-player character from the dungeon be his son? Yin Yutian thought that they really did resemble non-player characters. When they cried, he simply recited pre-written lines. Our hero approached the local resident. Jishin asked what Yin Yutian was planning to do. The guy replied that it was just an indifferent NPC, so it didn't react to his actions. This old man just recites pre-programmed lines. Jishin noted that it was still very strange. Everyone they'd met in dungeons before interacted differently. Yin Yutian asked his companion if he'd ever heard of anything like this. Jishin replied that he'd never heard of story-driven dungeons. Yin Yutian suggested they deal with the local boss first, then return to figure out what was going on here. The young people sat down on the flying carpet and set off on their aerial journey. A reconnaissance drone began circling in front of the flying carpet. Meanwhile, Sister Hu and her assistants were still waiting for Dao and Yin Yutian at the dungeon exit. Hu heard the incoming call and woke up. To keep from getting cold, she was inside a sleeping bag. It was Fan Chunui on the line. His holographic image appeared before the spies. Chunui asked why he still hadn't received a report confirming the order had been carried out. After all, they were supposed to have dealt with Yin Yutian. Sister Hu was at a loss and didn't know how to explain everything. Chunui was outraged. Had his order really not been carried out yet? Sister Hu explained that Brother Dao had entered the dungeon with Yin Yutian, but they still hadn't come out. Chunui was surprised. Could it be that they're having fun in there, clearing out one dungeon after another? Chunui received an incoming message and said he needed to read it. He would get back to them later. Sister Hu asked the assistants if they had really kept a close watch on the entrance and if no one had come out. The big guy said that it had been little Liang's turn the night before. Liang reported that he hadn't slept at all. Fan Chunui came back on the line and shouted that the hunters had already reached the westernmost dungeon. The commander ordered them to go after the hunters and eliminate Yin Yutian. Sister Hu and her assistants were forced to head in the specified direction. At that moment, an SUV was driving through the desert, kicking up a cloud of dust behind it. The SUV stopped, and two girls got out, Kui Shui and Wei Wei. Kui Shui wondered if she could handle it. Miss Fan said that it could be very dangerous and that Wei Wei didn't have to follow her at all. Wei Wei pointed out that she and Yin Yutian had been friends since childhood, so she simply had to come to his aid. Fan Duqiang in his office received a news report about the incident in the Western Dungeon. It was reported that a small group of hunters had reached the westernmost dungeon, which looked like an ancient castle. As a result, the entire group had been wiped out. Chief Fan thought that if things weren't as simple as they seemed, he would have to go there himself. Suddenly, someone appeared behind the man. The stranger said he wouldn't advise Mr. Fan to meddle in matters that weren't his concern. The man whose face was hidden ordered Fan Daquan not to make any sudden movements. He had only just begun to recover. There was no need to make the situation worse. The chief declared that he wasn't going to just let this slide. The stranger pressed a dagger to the old man's throat and said it didn't matter whether he intended to put up with it or not. The villain added that Chief Fan should not be exploring the western dungeons. He urged the chief to withdraw his men. Fan Dekong declared that anyone is free to explore the unclaimed dungeons in the west. This is a general rule for everyone, and no one has the right to impose such restrictions. The stranger asked if Chief Fan really had no intention of ordering his men to return. In that case, the news of Fan Dekong's death would serve as a compelling reason for their return. Sensing a threat, the old man activated his body's defensive enhancements. The leader became aggressive and decided to attack the stranger. However, the villain snapped his fingers and Fan Dacian didn't have time to react. The old man was attacked in that very instant, and his body was sliced to pieces. The stranger silently left the office. The flying carpet carrying the hunters continued its flight in the specified direction. At that moment, the route was passing through a gorge. When the flight came to an end, the passengers were dropped onto the ground. Yin Yutian noticed that after passing through the dungeon, the non-player characters should have been refreshed. Perhaps now it would become clear whether that short man was the son of the hunter Dao. Dao was disappointed with his mission, since he was supposed to infiltrate this group as a spy. In the end, things didn't go according to plan. The entrance to the dungeon appeared before the travelers. He Jishen checked the topographic map and confirmed that this was indeed the dragon's cave. The young people surmised that the boss's element in this cave was fire. Deep inside the cave, they discovered a captive girl chained to a cross. The path to her lay over scorching lava. The girl's eyes were closed, her body motionless. She showed no signs of life. Dao declared that all they had to do was free her, and the dungeon would be cleared. Yin Yutian noted that it wouldn't be that simple. Some kind of trap was definitely waiting for them. Our hero surmised that this girl had been hung there as bait. It was still unclear whether she was alive and why the enemy was nowhere to be seen. Dao walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. The drop was impressive. Dao had to admit that he'd been too hasty. Yin Yutian had been right. He Jishen called out loudly to Princess Jenny and asked if she was alive. There was no answer. The princess still showed no signs of life. The next moment, a rock flew toward the princess and struck her in the head. The girl showed no reaction whatsoever. Jishen looked at Yin Yutian and asked what he was doing. After all, they had a bound hostage right in front of them. How could anyone throw stones at her? The protagonist realized that the girl was just a non-player character, so he tried to wake her up. Dao tried to make his way to the princess and found himself on a section of the path that ran over lava. To the hunter's surprise, what looked like a narrow path turned out to be the monster's tail. The dragon stirred and nearly knocked Dao into the burning lava. The beast flapped its wings and rose into the air. It hovered above the young people. Yin Yutian surmised that this must be the boss. The dragon opened its mouth and roared loudly. A fireball appeared in its mouth. The fireball turned into a stream of flame, and the dragon directed it at the hunters. The hunters scattered in different directions, trying to avoid the fiery attack. As a result, the young people were forced to retreat. Their path to the princess was blocked. Yin Yutian walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down. He thought that now they needed to find other ways to cross the burning lava. Suddenly, the ground beneath He Jishen's feet began to give way, and the hunter, losing his balance, started to fall. Jishen tumbled into the abyss and shouted loudly for immediate help. Yin Yutian reached out a hand to his companion. With his other hand, he grabbed the edge of the cliff. In this way, they managed to avoid falling. The dragon continued to act aggressively, launching attacks to finish off the hunters. Dao, sword in hand, looked at the dragon and decided he would still settle the score. Thus, Dao engaged the enormous dragon, parrying its fiery attacks with his sword. Yin Yutian, seizing the moment, managed to climb out of the abyss and rescue He Jishen. Yin Yutian and He Jishen thanked Brother Dao for his timely help. The dragon continued to act aggressively and attack the hunters once more. He Jishin declared that he was in on the action too and activated his aggressive shadow skill. Seizing the opportunity, Yin Yutian leaped high into the air and found himself above the dragon. Our hero knew that the dragon's weak spot was on its head. He had to strike the target located on the crown of its head. The protagonist struck, but lost his balance and fell to the ground. He told his comrades that the dragon's weak spot was on its head and that they needed to hit the target on the crown of its head. It was He Jishin's turn. He took a running start to climb onto the dragon's head. Following their comrade, Dao and Yin Yutian rushed toward the dragon. The hunters climbed up in unison. The dragon didn't have time to react. Yin Yutian and Dao leaped up and found themselves above the dragon's head. He Jishin activated his aggressive shadow skill once more. The hunters swung their swords in unison. Now the coordination of their actions was crucial. The blows landed simultaneously. Blood spurted from the dragon's head in all directions. The monster roared loudly and collapsed to the ground. Dao thought it was all over. He Jishin was surprised. Could it really be that simple? Yin Yutian was puzzled. Why hadn't the reward appeared? The next moment, a strange cube appeared before the hunters. But what could this mean? The protagonist picked up the puzzle. Now he had to figure out what to do with it. The cube trembled in the young man's hands, grew hot, and began to emit excess energy. Yin Yutian tossed the object to the ground, just to be on the safe side. The cube began to smoke and eventually caught fire. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Someone was screaming for help. The hunters turned around and saw that Princess Jenny had woken up and was screaming loudly. The hunters headed toward the captive. He Jishin said they would rescue her right away. However, the protagonist sensed that something was wrong. His keen gaze told him he needed to be cautious. Dao approached the princess and told her that Her Majesty was now safe. The princess looked at the hunters and smiled strangely. The next moment, the girl's head transformed into that of a monster. Yin Yutian shouted that he understood everything. This was yet another trap. The monster's head grew larger and its enormous jaws were ready to devour the hunters. He Jishin and Dao managed to leap back to safety. Yin Yutian rushed to their aid. Our hero knocked his colleagues to the ground. The monster's head on its long neck missed, and the hunters were unharmed. The monster tried to reach Yin Yutian, but he remained cautious. From a safe distance, the hunters began to devise a plan to destroy this monster. Seeing that its efforts were in vain, the monster transformed back into Princess Jenny. Dao asked indignantly what was going on. Yin Yutian noticed that she looked frantic. Most likely, this was the hidden boss. He Jishin asked curiously how Yin Yutian had figured that out. Our hero explained all previous dungeons had two types of elements. First, monsters. Second, rewards. That's what all normal dungeons consist of. In this case, after defeating the dragon they thought was the boss, they received no rewards. That shouldn't be the case. Jishin said that everything was clear to him now. He understood why those who entered this dungeon never returned. There was an additional trap here. Dao thought this guy turned out to be pretty sharp. Without him, they might have died. The monster princess laughed loudly in response. She no longer looked like a helpless victim. The woman said that this hunter was the first to figure out her true nature. The chains binding the princess's hands were suddenly broken. Jenny added that she was amazed that this guy had managed to get this far. However, now he would have to face Chain Jenny. This was indeed the hidden S-rank boss, Chain Jenny. The monster began swinging her chains and warned the hunters to prepare for their doom. The woman took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air. This was followed by a powerful spit filled with poisonous liquid aimed at the hunters. He Jishin shouted that it was disgusting and added that he would distract Chain Jenny. However, the poisonous attack struck Jishin instead. The young man managed to raise his arms in front of him to protect himself. After that, the hunter's hands began to smoke, and he screamed in pain. Yin Yutian and Dao looked on in surprise at the human body's reaction to the liquid. It turned out that Jishin had saved them by taking the full brunt of the attack himself. Jishin suspected that the liquid was toxic.
Yin Yutian told He Jishin to step aside and stop interfering in the fight.
Dao thought that now he was in debt to this fat guy as well. Dao looked at Yin Yutian and decided that this guy would have to fight Chain Jenny on his own. Without hesitation, our hero headed toward the monster with the goal of defeating the princess. He Jishin shouted at Yin Yutian not to do anything foolish and to back off. The monster swung its chains at the hunter. Yin Yutian asked indignantly, "Why are its chains different lengths?" Dao said that now wasn't the best time to get distracted by that. He Jishin agreed that he was right. There must definitely be a reason why one chain is short and the other is long. The fat guy speculated that the long chain was used for ranged attacks, while the short one was for close combat. With that set of abilities, she could be classified as a powerful boss. Dao declared that he would be able to neutralize Chain Jenny's ranged attacks. Yin Yu Tian announced that, in that case, he would hold the monster at bay in close combat. But what would they do when she started spewing poisonous saliva? The princess declared that the hunters' discussions were pointless. They'd all die here today anyway. The protagonist said he was counting on Brother Dao. He was supposed to take the brunt of the attack with his long chain. Dao reminded him that this was exactly what he had intended to do. Chain Jenny went on a rampage, swinging her long chain. Dao joined the battle and activated his vortex attack. The monster's chain was caught in the vortex and began to be pulled toward its center. The long chain was deactivated. The monster was surprised. Could it be that the hunters actually intended to engage her in close combat? It was time for the protagonist to join the fray. The young man gathered speed and charged at the monster. Chain Jenny screamed furiously that this hunter would now be destroyed without mercy. Yin Yu Tian dodged the chain attack. The young man thought he could still make up for the damage with the decoy doll. The monster said that the man was very naive. However, that wasn't all. Chain Jenny took another deep breath. The protagonist didn't panic and pulled a packet of concentrated flying carpet out of his pocket. He still had a few more in reserve. The packet was hurled at the monster at tremendous speed and hit Chain Jenny right in the mouth. The woman choked and was unable to spit out the poisonous liquid. Upon coming into contact with the liquid, the concentrated flying carpet began to expand and return to its natural size. Dao and He Jishin said in unison that it was the most incredible improvisation. The monster turned blue from the incredible transformations taking place inside its mouth. However, its mouth remained sealed. The monster writhed, trying to do something. Anything? Yin Yu Tian approached the princess and swung his sword. Our hero landed several devastating blows. The monster's body was cut to pieces. Yin Yu Tian looked back and saw that, in place of the Chain Jenny, a mysterious cube-shaped object had reappeared. The hunters were surprised once again. But what could this mean? The cube began to glow. After that, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The cave was covered in cracks. Could this be an earthquake? Smoke engulfed the hunters. Visibility was reduced to zero. When the smoke cleared, the hunters saw that they were standing before a massive gate. The next moment, the gate swung open and light poured in. The hunters crossed the threshold and found themselves in a strange room. Yin Yu Tian wondered, where had they ended up? The young people found themselves in a secret laboratory. Everywhere there were huge flasks filled with liquid containing monsters. In one of the flasks was Chain Jenny, one of its variants. Brother Dao spotted the short guy from the city in another flask and said once again that this was his son. Yin Yu Tian was angry because he still didn't understand what this dungeon really was. He Jishin looked at the map and said that this must be where the westernmost dungeon ended. Where had this door led them? Dao fell onto his back and spread his arms wide. His companions were startled. What was going on? Dao got down on his knees, clutched his head, and said he'd remembered something. Many years ago, this had been a region with dungeons open for free exploration. The territory under the country's control ended here. However, the country's military later took control of the area, and exploration ceased. The military turned this dungeon into an experimental facility. Local residents were used for their purposes. Dao added that this was an artificial dungeon. Yin Yu Tian asked who was capable of pulling something like this off. Dao replied that the country's first military commander was an S-rank hunter named Gaboni. On the side of the road, along the SUV's route, stood Sister Hu and her subordinates. They were once again listening to Fan Chinui's orders. Wei Wei was frustrated. Why was the signal so bad here? She couldn't even send a message home. As they drove by, the girls saw the hunters standing on the side of the road. Wei Wei wondered what those three were doing there. Cui Shui suggested that they might be live streaming their walk through the desert. Sister Hu and her assistants watched the SUV drive by. Fan Chinui, as always, was dissatisfied. Why couldn't these three even complete a simple task? Fan Chinui looked back and saw the robotic manipulator arm. He asked in surprise what Mr. Gaboni was doing there. The manipulator arm said that the hunters had already discovered his experimental site. Chinui had failed the mission. Pan Chinui, terrified, begged for another chance, promising to make everything right. Sister Hu was surprised to discover that Fan Chinui had disappeared. The communication session was interrupted. The woman wondered what had happened. Fan Chinui had been attacked by a mechanical manipulator arm, and his body had sustained serious damage. Sister Hu and her assistants saw Fan Chunui again. However, this time his body was pierced by mechanical tentacles. Chunui ordered the destruction of everyone in the experimental dungeon. Yin Yu Tian, having received the relevant information from Dao, thought things through carefully, trying to make the right decision. He Jishin was the first to break the silence, saying that things were looking bad. They had entered a secret military zone. They needed to get out of there as quickly as possible. Yin Yu Tian asked in surprise, "Isn't this a great field for research?" Suddenly the alarm went off and the gates began to close. Liquids began to leak from the test tubes and the monsters started to stir. Each of the monsters now had a chance to escape. He Jishin was genuinely terrified and said that they were definitely in trouble now. The escaped monsters gathered together and it became clear that nothing good could come of them. Yin Yu Tian declared that they had nowhere to retreat. They would have to fight. Suddenly, a mysterious platform began to descend from the ceiling of the dungeon. He Jishin was surprised. Could this really be a spatial teleport? But that's a key military technology. The bottom of the mysterious platform opened and vortex-like currents emerged from within. The next moment, a cylindrical capsule descended to the floor of the cave. He Jishin's suspicions were confirmed. Fan Dekong emerged from the capsule into the cave. His body was still pierced by mechanical tentacles. The traitor's appearance did not bode well. He was in an aggressive mood. Fan Dekong joined forces with the four monsters. Now they clearly outnumbered the hunters, who truly had nowhere to retreat. Dao was surprised. Why had Fan Chunui himself come here? Was it time for him to reveal his hand? However, the hunter thought that these guys had saved him time and again, and now he didn't want to fight against them under any circumstances. Yin Yu Tian drew his sword from its sheath and said that he had recognized Fan Chunui in this monster. Could it be that he had come here to finish what he had started? He Jishin told his companions not to rush to conclusions. Chunui looked more like one of the local test subjects than like himself. Fan Chunyu let out a battle cry and, accompanied by the monsters, began to close in on the hunters. Clenching their fists, the monsters charged forward, filled with determination. The hunters didn't lose their composure. However, Dao said he had to find a way to save his son. A preliminary solution was found. Dao struck the monster and deactivated it. After that, the hunter took the old man by the arm and tried to lead him to safety. He Jishin noticed that after Fan Chunyu's eyes turned red, the other monsters also went berserk. Yin Yu Tian asked his comrade how his observation could help. In any case, they had to take out Fan Chunyu first. Our hero, swinging his sword, approached his main opponent. The protagonist was surprised to find that Fan Chunui had become quite sluggish. Yin Yu Tian struck with his sword, but Chunui thrust his arms forward and blocked the attack. At that moment, Chunui looked more like a cyborg than a mere test subject. The protagonist managed to jump aside, thereby dodging his opponent's attack. Our hero was forced to move around the room to avoid being struck by the powerful cyborg. Yin Yu Tian wondered how Fan Chunui had managed to turn into such a monster. Suddenly, Yin Yu Tian and He Jishin found themselves trapped in a confined space. The hunters didn't understand what was happening. Fan Chunui appeared immediately. The monster, as always, was aggressive. The monster's metal tentacles unfurled and strange devices appeared at their tips. One of the devices ended up in Fan Chunui's hand. Yin Yu Tian knew this wouldn't lead to anything good. There were surveillance cameras in this enclosed space. Footage from these cameras and other devices was displayed on screens. The person with access to them was closely watching what was happening. The people in the car were identified. One of the young women was identified as Fan Shuai Shui, the current head of the Fan family. The observers said that, for the time being, this young woman still had practical value. Other monsters also appeared in the enclosed space alongside Fan Chunui. The hunters had fallen into a trap. Fan Chunui activated the device and triggered an electromagnetic pulse. Yin Yu Tian and He Jishin dodged, and the electromagnetic pulse, bouncing off the walls, rebounded and struck the monster. However, Chunui was unharmed. Our hero decided he had to do something before it was too late. The electromagnetic pulse, bouncing off the walls, traveled at high speed through the enclosed space. The protagonist made the only right choice. He began moving around the room, drawing the fire onto himself. He dodged, and the pulse struck the monsters. The old monster was hit by the pulse and destroyed. Chain Jenny was also damaged. He Jishin asked if Yin Yu Tian had any ideas on what to do next. The hunter added that they wouldn't be able to keep dodging the pulse projectiles ricocheting off the walls of the enclosed space for long. Fang Chunu prepared to continue firing the magnetic pulse cannon. Yin Yu Tian realized that after transforming into a monster, Chunui had become much slower, so the young man rushed toward the villain. The protagonist kicked his opponent in the chest and declared that the monster must be destroyed at any cost. Chunui fell to the floor and the cannon slipped from his hands. A powerful explosion followed. The shockwave sent the hunters flying to the side, where they slammed into the wall. When the smoke cleared, Yin Yutian saw that the cyborg was standing there again with a gun slung over his shoulder. He Jishin logically pointed out that they had barely managed to dodge a single ricocheting shell. But things would get worse if he kept firing. Yin Yutian grabbed his sword and said he wanted to try something. Fan Chunui fired another shot. Yin Yutian swung his blade and severed the monster's arm. The monster screamed loudly in pain. The young man thought if the monster's skin can deflect a pulse projectile, then this arm will come in handy. He picked it up from the floor. With his remaining hand, Fan Chunui hoisted the cannon onto his shoulder and prepared to fire again. The next moment, a magnetic pulse projectile flew out of the cannon. Yin Yutian thought this was his chance. The young man deflected the projectile back toward the monster as if with a tennis racket. Fan Chunu was knocked out cold and remained lying on the floor, showing no signs of life.